So you'll be doing the pledge, and Chief Mixon's going to do the prayer. Eric, y'all ready? David, are we ready? Let's get the deputy clerk. There we go. Council members ready? Let's let the scout troop get in. Chief. We'll let the scout troop get settled. Wow. We have a chance to get out of here early tonight, but we'll find a way to blow that. Oh, we have waterworks at 8:30 in the morning tomorrow. Yes. We're gonna have to talk to them about it. It ain't easy to do all the work, know all the motions, read all the minutes, and then I go straight from there to Carter. I mean, it's kind of weird. I don't want to mess them up, but it's just kind of. So I'll see you there, but at least we get free supper tonight and free breakfast tomorrow. So don't sit those kids near. Good evening, everyone. Let me call to order the Tuesday, January 14th monthly meeting of Mount Pleasant Town Council. Our agenda has been published. I hope you got a copy. Our first order of business will be the prayer from Fire Chief Mixon, followed by the pledge by Mayor Pro Tem Whitley. Please stand.
I invite you to pray with me. Gracious God, we come before you with thankful hearts for the opportunity and freedom to have this meeting. Grant us wisdom and understanding as we discuss the matters before us, and guide us with your spirit as we work together to make this community a better place. Father God, we lift those up tonight to you that are hurting, suffering, and in pain, especially those that are victims of the wildfires. May they feel your presence. We ask these things in your precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Item 3 is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, the agenda is approved. Item 4 would be public hearings, awards, and presentations. There are none. Item 5, approval of the minutes from December 10th Town Council meeting and the November 24 financial statement.
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say
Aye.
Aye.
aye. All right, they are approved. This moves us to item 6, which is public comment. When your name is called, please come forward, give name and address. Everyone gets 2.5 minutes by ordinance, and you will hear the timer go off. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First speaker, George Freeman.
Good evening. It's been a while since I've been here. George Freeman, 1450 Bowman Road, president of the Cage organization. I'm here this evening to appeal to your better nature. Some years ago, a previous council started what we call a multi-path. The plan was that as any new road were built, the multi-path would go on it, and any new subdivision built, the multi-path would be built along with that new subdivision. The path that has been created because of that is Watermark, Midtown, and Hungry Neck, which is part of Sweetgrass and Billy's Wells. Pretty soon, you're going to build a connection from 6 Mile to Hamlin Road. You will complete a multi-path from Bowman Road all the way to Poche Bluff. I was looking forward to it, and I'm surprised now to have to deal with the town trying to build this trail that you call it, which is just a 10-foot wide sidewalk through my neighborhood and my family's neighborhood. Me personally, I don't feel that's necessary to come back and disrupt long-standing communities, especially when the plan works and the path is almost completed. There's no need to have two parallel paths on this side of the town of Mount Pleasant. I heard in a meeting recently that quarter of the community lives over there, and that's why they're gonna come down Rifle Range Road. If you connect the subdivisions in that area to Hungry Neck, that would eliminate those people on Rifle Range Road. I'll end with this. It's strange to me that the African American population only makes up about 5% of the town of Mount Pleasant. But the Mount Pleasant Way goes through almost every one of our neighborhoods. Something's wrong with that picture. Thank you.
Nick Isbranson.
She had shoes on when we came in here. She speaks more freely when they're off, I guess. I'm Nick Isbranson, 2182 Cultura Circle in Liberty Hill Farm. So I'm a resident now, a little over a year. We've moved from Colorado, and by way of there, we're in New York City. By way of there, we're in Connecticut. So based on the news today, obviously everyone's focused on Washington, but we left all of those places because of kind of inept policies, because of bad judgments, because of the way the cities were run. And we've been running away, and we came to South Carolina, and we came to Mount Pleasant because we were tired of running. We wanted to come to a place where effective governance was in place, where there's pragmatic decisions could be made, where I could raise my kids. I've got another one at home. My wife's traveling back to Colorado, where there's stabbings in downtown, where the city council just isn't taking things seriously. Luckily here, we have great problems to deal with. Where Liberty Hill Farm, we're talking about enclosures. We're talking about how can I ensure that we can respect Mother Nature, that we can ensure that we're responsibly building our homes, but at the same time, we need to be able to enclose our garages. And I think some of you have come out and seen what we're dealing with there. But a place where I can have a stroller, my wife doesn't need to lug, pregnant wife with a child in this one doesn't need to lug a stroller down 16 flights of stairs, or 16 stairs, to get down to go walk it. So we can have our toys so that the EV things aren't getting rotted out and all sorts of stuff. So there must be a way that we can kind of come to a conclusion on this problem where we can close up our garages, we can meet the FEMA requirements, we can meet our private insurance requirements as we coordinate with them, and at the same time, come to an effective conclusion. So I don't know all the details on what's been said, and I'm kind of coming in midway through the second act on when this problem's been raised, but there just must be a way that I think we can kind of just move the ball forward on this and come to a remediation where we get our families' needs met, and at the same time responsibly build. Thank you.
James Wilson.
Good evening, members of council. I'm James Wilson. I'm here with Mike Bennett on behalf of Patriots Annex. As most of you know, we had a good, thorough conversation at Planning Committee, and we really appreciate the opportunity to respond to questions and have that discussion. So thank you for that. We think there are probably just a few key points and questions that came out of that. First, as we've said, we're essentially keeping the same zoning as we transition from WGC, Waterfront Gateway, to the PD. As we said, we literally started by cutting and pasting the WGC into the new PD, and as we've said multiple times, we then made some tweaks to it. Those are really sort of site design oriented. I mean, a few of those, for example, to allow palm trees as street trees. For example, we suggested allowing some flat roofs, not all flat roofs. The first building, already approved by DRB, has Seafair Hotel, has a pitch roof. And then we proposed moving the parking to the exterior, which is consistent with a pedestrian-oriented. Sorry, I'm not sure where. Stop the time. Any rate, moving the parking to the exterior, allowing palm trees on the street, we think these are all good things. So these are tweaks that we think are positive for everybody, for the town, for the development. But fundamentally, the zoning is remaining the same. It's not allowing any more development. And it's keeping all the key things, the public waterfront, the 10% open space, those things, all the very, really important things. The concept here you've heard is to do a pedestrian-oriented seaside village. We're looking to the old village for inspiration. That's what we're trying to accomplish. The height is already reduced compared to the adjacent properties that are developed, the hotels next door, over where the Renaissance and office building are. We're down from that. In the first building, Seafair Hotel, is actually lower than what's allowed. It was unanimously approved by DRB. We think all of that is pointing in the right direction. We think the main question that came out of Planning Committee was the location of the Grand Lawn. This conceptual plan, of course, has evolved a little bit over time, but the current DRB plan actually had it separated with some buildings from the waterfront. Let me say this. Lastly, we are really okay if we just need to remain waterfront gateway. We think this is a positive for the community, for everybody. Yes, sir. But that's okay if that's really where this council needs us to be. Please ask us any questions. We're happy to respond. Thank you. Thank you.
Allison Shore.
Good evening. Allison Shore, 2220 Cultura Circle. I'm here once again to request a review and amendment to the flood ordinance regarding garage enclosures. I and other residents of Liberty Hill Farm continue to be frustrated with the flood committee and town council for not hearing our pleas. As noted many times before, I was not told of and never received a non-conversion agreement. Sales at Liberty Hill Farm confirm one does not exist for my home. If this was required, why was the certificate of occupancy approved? Communication is definitely an issue. I enclose my garage with plywood to keep out water, mold, mildew, of obvious health concerns there, insects, pollen, dirt, and protect my belongings. The enclosed garage also provides additional safety as a single homeowner. The current ordinance, I believe, was not voted on by the residents of Mount Pleasant. Residents of Liberty Hill Farm have requested a meeting for over 6 months to discuss this issue. We've heard getting more information, looking into it, but we just feel we're not being heard. Only 30 residents of Liberty Hill Farm received notice of impending fines starting 2/1. Obviously, there's other enclosures that are continuing to exist across Mount Pleasant. The entire neighborhood represents only 2% of the total town, and we're being singled out. I ask that you put a hold on this threat until we've had our opportunity to discuss with the committee and town council to find a resolution we can all live with. Can we not just use FEMA guidance and include flood vents to meet necessary guidelines? Thank you.
Chip McQueenie.
Good evening. I'm Chip McQueenie. I live at 311 Megan's Bay Lane, which is in unincorporated Berkeley County. I'm an attorney with the Byrne Foreman Law Firm. I represent the proposed purchaser of 620 Wando Park Boulevard, which is on your agenda today as item A4 under planning. The idea behind the purchase and the rezoning, the properties within the Bell Hall PD, which was adopted in 1988. In 2002, the Economic Development Zoning Ordinance was is a base zoning district was adopted, and the Bell Hall PD was amended to include this particular property within the ED. I was sort of surprised, but hospital use is allowed in the ED zoning district for the Bell Hall PD, but medical office is not. The purchaser actually, or related entity, owns the adjacent parcel, which used to be the hospice facility, and is building a behavioral health services center for inpatient treatment, which is considered a hospital because it has inpatient beds. This rezoning is requested for the adjacent parcel to allow outpatient care, same services. That's the plan with it. I'm here to answer any questions if any of you have any. Thank you.
Derek Johnson.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Town Council. My name is Derek Johnson. I live at 1601 Farmers Way in Liberty Hill Farm. I am also here this evening to discuss the garage enclosures. Excuse me. The issue around the garage enclosures within our neighborhood. We're concerned that the removal of the enclosures that are already in place will not only destroy our property, but will create health issues, allowing mold, dirt, rodents, insects, as I'm sure you've heard from many of my neighbors, that will happen. There's also the security aspect of it. Having some sort of barrier between the passersby or anybody that wants to do any harm to us is removed. The way it is now, you can just reach in and open the back door to the garage, which has direct access to the home, which is not a safe thing at all. Even if there are locks at the doors at the top of the stairs, it still is one layer of security that's not going to be there. Excuse me. As we were one of the earlier people moving into the neighborhood, we were one of the first people that enclosed our garage to the point where we had intent of doing this before we moved in. We spoke with our sales rep about it. We spoke with the designer, the home designer, about it, with no notice or notification that was going to be an issue. And to the point where the sales folks from K. Nadian came to our home with potential buyers to show us how we enclosed our garage. And then all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from under us. We enclosed our garage in a very basic sort of way. We used breakaway foam board that would allow for floodwaters to basically break away the board and come through the home as if it wasn't there, in the same fashion in which the screens that are currently approved to be in place would work. Even better so, because the boards just break away and float away with the water. I invite all of you, any of you, to come to my home anytime to see what we've done and how we've done it to further explain that. I do ask that you consider further continuance in the removal before the fines of the removal of the garage enclosures. And I thank you for your time and hope that we can come to an amicable final outcome of our mutual objectives to keep our homes safe from floodwaters and the belongings and the people inside them safe as well. Thank you.
Ellen Zuba.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Ellen Zuba, and I'm here representing residents of Phillips Creek, which is a 3-year-old community off of Highway 41 near Park West and next to the Phillips community. I've lived in my home for 3 years now, and we love living in Mount Pleasant. Our plan is that this will be our forever home and our forever community. However, today I'm here out of extreme concern for the safety of our residents and our children, and I'm here to understand first, this is my first town council, whether this has been raised before, and if not, to raise this to the town and figure out what we can do for next steps. Over the 3 years that we've lived in this community, there have been multiple instances of gunfire in which we've found it necessary to call the Mount Pleasant police. Due to heavy gunfire reaching our neighborhoods from neighborhoods directly adjacent to Phillips Creek. Since we've lived here, the frequency at which we've heard the gunfire has only increased. This is not just an issue on the holidays, although we certainly hear gunfire on the holidays. We have felt dismissed as a community before that is just commonplace at the holidays. Not only is that an unacceptable answer, but it's simply not true. We hear bullets being fired in the broad daylight and at night as well. And it's very clear to us that the shots are being fired from Isaiah Smalls Road or Parker Island Road off of Highway 41. Following regular gunfire from these neighborhoods, we've been advised at times from Mount Pleasant Police that they have no jurisdiction over the shots that are being fired. In the community is initiated directly next to our neighborhood, and as a result, we've been instructed to call Charleston County Police Department. This was a recommendation given to us even after we reported a shot that was fired and went through a child's bedroom window in our neighborhood over the summer. And once we spoke to other police officers, we were also then told to just call 911, but more or less feel that we've been given the runaround. And so I know that I'm running out of time, but I know my neighbor is also signed up to speak today, but what we're really looking to understand is how we can work with the town to ensure that we have the right police presence responding to incidents near our neighborhood. Mount Pleasant Police as well. We're residents of Mount Pleasant, and we really just want to make sure that shots being fired for recreation or target practice on their own properties within our residential neighborhoods is enforced, because as I said, we had a shot go through a child's bedroom window over the summer. So thank you for your time.
Brian Wells.
Hello, my name is Brian Wells. I'm a homeowner at 938 Tupelo Bay Drive in Mount Pleasant. I'm a professional engineer, structural engineer, and I own an architectural firm in Mount Pleasant called Coastal Creek Design. And I'm here tonight to speak about the item that's under old business, the final reading for an ordinance about the tree protection zones. And I first apologize that I have not been to the previous meetings. I have been talking to a lot of other design professionals, and they were not aware of the changes in the ordinance that were coming, and I just became recently aware of the changes. The current tree ordinance is working in Mount Pleasant, and I don't know of any instances where there's been trees that have been damaged or died because of the current tree ordinance with regards to, and what we're talking about is the setback distance from new construction or renovations, additions in relation to those trees. As design professionals, me and my colleagues want trees. We want healthy trees. It's very important to what we do as designers. We love trees, but I don't see the reason to try to add this significant restriction on the tree protection zones. This is also a property rights issue. I think that there's a lack of affordable housing in Mount Pleasant. A lot of what we do design-wise is designing accessory units and additions that allow families to go multi-generational, to allow their older parents or their kids that are graduating from college to come back and live with them. So I'd ask you to put a pause on this item until we can get some more design professionals involved in the discussion. And again, I really apologize that we're coming here at the last minute to try to sway this decision, but I do really think it's important for the town to consider both sides of the argument. And if there was trees that were dying in the town as a result of the current practices, that would be one thing, but it's just not happening right now. So I don't really know the genesis of why this was proposed, and I also am concerned there's going to be a fair amount of lawsuits that come as a result when their property rights are taken away and they start to challenge it. I really appreciate your time tonight.
Ellen Moore.
Good evening. My name is Ellen Moore, and I live at 1469 Gunnison Street. I'm here to make a request about the Patriots Point 1% convention tax proposal that was pulled after introduced in an emergency meeting, bypassing all town protocols and procedures on December the 2nd. And 1 week later, on December the 9th, the mayor pulled the plug. Yes, mistakes were made. So residents of Mount Pleasant, myself and many others I've spoken with, have questions given what occurred. And we have questions that we know will lead to answers and inform everything that went on with this issue, because frankly, we're questioning the competence of our elected town officials based on what happened with this issue. So we want to know things like who was involved in this effort, when and to what extent, which town council members and staff and others, how much of the town tax dollars, our resident tax dollars, were invested in this effort that took us all by surprise. Given the depth and the quality of the materials presented that I saw, I'm sure that there was likely more than $100,000 spent on consultants and preparation for this material, notwithstanding staff time. So why did this happen? What were we trying to solve for? How could all of these resources have been accessed without town council knowledge? I'm requesting an independent investigation and report that's made available to our town residents. No later than August 1st, frankly, because yes, this is a municipal election year, and the voting residents of the town of Mount Pleasant deserve this insight and information that will be based on this independent investigation. And again, we're questioning our decisions that we must make about our elected officials in the upcoming election. So thank you.
Kevin Cunane.
Good evening, Kevin Cunane, River Vista Way. Last month, raised a few issues at the public comment, but most importantly, I sent an email asking a simple question. If the mayor is on Patriots Point Board as an ex officio member, which I believe he is, and he's also on a nonprofit board that then interacts with the Patriots Point Board, I asked, is that nonprofit board also an ex officio position? I know it's been a busy month, but has any of you checked your town cell phones or emails or mailboxes? Because I didn't get one peep of a response. It's a simple question. I'm not making any accusations, but I would like to know, is that an ex officio job or not? And if it's not, then how is the mayor opining on that organization's applications at Patriots Point Board and here? Simple question. This is a good government issue. Someone up there should be able to find out. Right? It's not a profit thing. There's no profit like nonprofit, though. We've got to remember that. But what is there a divided loyalty? I think it sounds like there could be. Again, I don't know if it's an ex officio position. If it is, fine. If it's not, it raises a whole bunch of other questions. Because which side are you on when you're making a decision? Are you nonprofit board member, or are you mayor or Patriots Point board member? And those positions, those ex officio jobs are representing us, kind of indirectly. They're sent there because the mayor would be sent there because he's the mayor, or a council member gets sent there, whatever. The other thing is, on this multi-use path, I noticed there's new branding signs that popped up on Faison Road and on Park West Boulevard. I'm sure other places too. Little sign. You know, I'm thinking might be some places where you could use a little stop sign or a crosswalk sign or a safety sign and kind of discard the branding. What benefit do we get by having a sign that says Mount Pleasant Way and wasting resources planting that pole? And they probably paid someone to design the sign too. I mean, that's crazy. What benefit do you get from that? Thank you.
Michael Byron.
Good evening. Michael Byron, 1277 Waterfront Drive. I haven't seen anybody ask any questions, and maybe this is the wrong place to ask a question, and hopefully maybe one of you will answer. But I just had one simple question. Is the moratorium on the multifamily been canceled or lifted?
Sir, we'd only answer questions that's public comment only. Under Robert's rules, we would be having discussion with no proper motion or reason to do it, and it would be unlimited. So I'm sure a staff member can answer that question for you afterwards.
Well, we've been having problems getting the answer from staff. That's why we brought it to your attention. But thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Lee Gasly.
Good evening, Lee Gastley, 1881 Capri Drive, Charleston County. I'm a landscape architect and managing principal for Seaman Whiteside and Associates. I do want to echo the comments of my design professional that spoke earlier regarding the zoning code and some of the modifications that are proposed, but I really wanted to talk about the vested rights component of that for projects that are currently in design and how those would be addressed if that ordinance were to get second reading tonight. As you all know, we've got Rifle Range Road Park, we've got the Mugsy Kerr tennis complex renovations, which are, you know, moving along, but are those vested? And then, of course, you've got the issue with private property as well. So I just would like to get hopefully some answers with regards to that, because those are pretty important questions if you elect to vote on that this evening. Thank you so much.
Michelle Stress.
Hello, good evening. I'm Michelle Stress at 545 Veranda View in Mount Pleasant. I have a couple of things to say, so I'll try to divide and conquer here. The first thing is I am really hoping that you guys support the ordinance of supporting the stronger protection of the trees and supporting the tree task force. I think that that is very important. We've spent a lot of time discussing this. To make a comment here, Mr. Brian Wells, I would like to think that that was a comment that was genuine and didn't have any, it did not sort of kick back any gratuitous anything, but that in fact that is incorrect, because he's currently at the Board of Zoning Appeals trying to cut down one historic chestnut, two protected chestnuts, and one historic water oak in order to put a dwelling in behind somebody's house. So if this goes through, he's kind of screwed. So he's upset. And so it's not for altruistic of saying that there was no problem with this. It's clearly because he's going to be impacted, which is sad to think he's only thinking of himself. Additionally, as far as Patriots Point, I just want to say I appreciate the changes that they have made since 2018. I'm switching gears here. And I try to stay aware of the things that are going on, but I have to admit that it's a bit confusing with the PDD and WGC zoning. And I think that, you know, I hate that term, but you keep them dumb, you keep them down. And I feel like we just don't have enough information. And the developers are saying that they are fine with flexing, which that seems just a little, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right that they're fine with flexing, that they're not sort of saying that I really want to, we're going to stay put and this is what we want. And the reason is I'm asking why. Why is it, it seems like there's pros and cons to both of these, PDD and this WGC. If it's WGC, how do we keep them accountable? How do we make sure that they're keeping all their promises? Because it doesn't sound like it sort of sounds like we lose sight of that. But then if it's PDD, how can we ensure that there's things for the environment? So, thank you.
Lauren Anderson.
Hey there, Lauren Anderson, 1015 Cliffwood Drive. I've lived in Mount Pleasant for almost 21 years, and I've been a resident of the Groves right here behind Town Hall since 2017. I'm here tonight to express my gratitude and strong support for the new zoning ordinances, particularly the tree protection measures included in it. This is a much needed step forward for our community, and I thank you for your leadership in prioritizing the preservation of our beautiful town. In my own neighborhood, we've witnessed unprecedented destruction of grand trees, iconic and irreplaceable elements of our landscape that have stood for generations, providing beauty, shade, habitat, and critical environmental benefits. This pattern of loss cannot continue. Stronger protections are essential to ensure that our town retains its character and natural beauty for future generations. I'm also here to voice my full support for the formation of a tree task force. I urge the council to empower this task force fully and commit to implementing their recommendations in a meaningful way. Preservation, enforcement, and mitigation must be at the heart of these efforts to truly make a difference. Thank you again for your commitment to protecting our town's natural resources. Let's continue working to ensure these protections are not just words on paper, but principles we uphold. Thank you.
Shaylin Noon.
Let me interrupt real quickly. A council member has asked if you're here with small kids and you'd like to go ahead and speak, go ahead, or are you next anyway? That's amazing. Thank you. You've done a great job, and that sound is music to our ears.
My name is Shaylin Noon. I'm at 1645 Farmers Way. This is Grady. He's 10 months old. This is Jackson. He's 2. We're here to discuss the garage enclosure issue at Liberty Hill Farm. This is the 4th time I've attended this meeting to try to be heard, and it's disheartening to feel like we've had no movement on this issue. We moved across the country to Mount Pleasant from California with the hopes of providing these two a better life. We were searching for the American dream, and we're starting to feel discouraged, like Mount Pleasant may not be the place to allow that. This is an issue of health and safety. For health, having mold growing on your infant's stroller, bugs in the car seats. I mean, what would you do if it were your babies? It's scary to think about the impact of mold exposure on their fragile immune system. My family aside, I work for a medical supply company, and it's my job to provide this community with their diabetes supplies that are kept in my enclosed garage. And if our community weren't able to access their insulin, that would be catastrophic. For safety, alligators come into the garages. Any intruders can get into any of your property and enter. My husband travels for work, and I often solo parent, and it's my solo responsibility to protect these kids. And I feel like the town is telling me in order to comply with these flood ordinances that I have to be left exposed. It's a safety risk. We in Liberty Hill Farm represent 2% of the community, and you're holding 2% accountable to uphold a standard that allows 100% to participate in FEMA. It doesn't seem right, especially when this 2% all have private flood insurance and don't participate in FEMA. We appreciate your reconsideration of the flood ordinances, and I hope this time we don't feel ignored. And thank you, everyone, for dealing with these two. I'm really sorry. We're going to leave now. Okay, come on. Thank you.
John Rosenberg.
My name is J.R. Rosenberg, 2263 Cultura Circle, Liberty Hill Farms. I speak to you this evening regarding the city mandate in our new built neighborhood regarding the garage enclosures. After months of trying to get some type of compromise from the city officials, many of us are still confused regarding the differences in what is allowed versus what is not. What we understand now is that we can build a 299 square foot room inside of our garage with 4 walls, a structure from floor to ceiling, with a door and FEMA vents inside the garage. Doesn't installing the approved FEMA vents in an enclosed garage also accomplish the same objective, or possibly better without a separate structure being built on the interior? Don't they both accomplish the end goal, allowing water to flow in and out of the structure? Could someone with the city please explain the difference, as it seems apparent that the solution to either is to install the FEMA vents? Please reconsider your position and give us some further guidance before as time is running out. Thank you.
Laura Langevin.
I'm Laura Langevin. I live at 2229 Cultura Circle, Liberty Hill Farm. I had all these notes written, but as I'm listening to everybody speak, I think the bottom line for Liberty Hill Farm is we have had one person listen to us and communicate with us, which is John Iacofano, who's not on the Flood Resilience Committee. if one member of flood resilience would come out, well, we get emails that kind of talk in circles and don't give definitive answers, and then we ask questions and we get no response. So I appreciate an email, Laura. I do appreciate that, but it didn't answer anything. It seems like, so being told we're not going to discuss it, you know, that sort of thing, to me is just not an option. And I understand CRS ratings or CSR. I've spent so much time in that stupid FEMA manual. I get it. I get it that you want to do that for this town. But at our expense, it is not okay with me. I had 5 credentialed or licensed people from your town, real estate agents, contractors, misinform me. And I blame you for that, not holding them accountable and not educating them on that. We're suffering. Our community is suffering. It's causing animosity among us and other neighborhoods who are not following that rule. And before 2021 had to be 199 square feet enclosed, and we know that's not happening. I mean, it's just a mess. You have a mess on your hands. It is upsetting as a person who has spent a lot of money here and decided to retire here. It's not okay. In the end, it's just not okay. So I guess that's what I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Brian Ray.
Good evening, Mayor, Town Council. My name is Brian Ray. I live at 1505 Cultivation Lane. We purchased the house in May. We love the neighborhood. I think along with everybody in the neighborhood, there was no non-conversion agreements that were given out by the builder to any of the owners in the neighborhood. And I understand ignorance of the ordinance is not an excuse, but based on kind of being misled, I think there's well over 30 houses that have enclosed their garages. My stance on it is I completely am game and ready to comply with a federal FEMA standard. I know there's the breakaway flood vents that allow water in and then they break open to allow it out. It's a federal standard. Every 200 square feet of space, you get one. I mean, I think all of us are on board with that as a solution. You know, a couple of quick things that seem a little arbitrary. So I've looked at the flood line. So there's 2 model homes in the front of our neighborhood that are on the other side of the flood line. They're allowed to completely enclose, along with all of Fort Palmetto Drive, which is the first street. So half the neighborhood or a good portion of it is totally free to enclose. And then it just seems very arbitrary that, you know, my next door neighbor can enclose next to me, but I can't. So the line starts there, it goes through my yard. And so, you know, we think, well, basically as a solution, you know, I think there's been some dialogue. Laura, you had emailed with me and I thank you for that. And John as well, you would email me back and thank you for that. I think hopefully we can get some dialogue and get a chance to get in front of the Flood Resilience Committee and maybe just look at this and see if a good solution, because we want to be compliant, we want it to be safe, but I think requiring 40% of the entire wall to be open is excessive, and it's a little arbitrary. I think Oyster Point is also subject to kind of maybe the same code. I counted over 100 houses in there that are enclosed. So it's arbitrary to me. It's not necessarily being enforced. And so we feel like, you know, we would ask that for an extension. There's the January 31st deadline, and we would just ask if y'all would, you know, kindly grant an extension so there can be maybe a little further dialogue, maybe a chance to get in front of the Flood Resilience Committee, and hopefully even a chance to get on the town, the agenda one evening prior to being forced, because I know it's going to be well over $10,000. The guy that we bought the house from did a professional job of enclosing it, so it's not only expensive, but I feel like it's overkill. So we're kind of hoping for, you know, just a reconsideration and you know, obviously complying with the federal standard we think would be a fair solution. So thank you so much.
Ross Ritchie.
Good evening. I'm Ross Ritchie at 1435 Kinglet Street. I'm an architect in town of Loyal Architects, and I'm going to speak about the change to the tree protection zone. I deeply value trees and prioritize designing homes within the natural and historical site context. Trees are a tremendous asset to neighborhoods and providing beauty and a sense of connection to nature. However, doubling the tree protection zone raises significant concerns. It quadruples the area that is protected, severely restricting buildable areas, especially on small and narrow lots, as well as lots that have a lot of mature trees on it. I mean, it nearly makes lots unbuildable. And it really limits the ability to design homes and additions that blend into the landscape a hallmark of older neighborhoods that enhances the established community feel. There's going to be increased costs, a lot more BZA because there's going to be a lot more encroachments because it's going to happen. Additional tree assessments, preservation plans, maintenance. There's tens of thousands of dollars just based on the tree protection zones. Specialized construction techniques, route mapping, airspace, like a lot more expensive construction techniques that'll need to be done. This only pushes the cost of development or, designing in our area further, exacerbating the housing crisis even more. And really pushes development to out in the forest, cutting down more trees. Then also, without clear guidelines for mitigating or allowing for encroachments, it's just up to the town's discretion, and from town staff, sometimes it's unpredictable what exactly way they want to do it. I think if there was more nuanced guidelines of how things can encroach, would be great. In like the current ordinance treats properties, single-family homes, of whether it has 25 inches of tree or 300 inches of tree, the exact same. That's unlike commercial or development projects or properties. So, maybe we study the amount of canopy on a lot or the amount of tree, just to have some kind of balance, a little common sense to it. And then again, I want to echo the other design professionals, but, is there data about the current one failing? Again, thank you.
William Curter.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you so much for meeting and listening to what we have to say. So my neighbor, Ellen, talked about an incident that we had in our neighborhood last summer, a bullet that went through a child's bedroom. That child was mine. And I want to just describe a little bit about what happened and then maybe offer a few opportunities for us as a town to come together and maybe prevent something like this from happening. So the bullet that came through the window came at about roughly this height, about as high as I can reach. Went through the window, went through a rolled up shade, bounced off the wall here, and then embedded in a far wall. Where my daughter sits to do her homework is where I'm standing, right here. So it was where she would have been had we been home. We weren't home, thank goodness. A rifle bullet fired roughly point blank will go through about 19 layers of sheetrock. So this bullet had substantial energy coming into our home. We were really disappointed by the response of both the Charleston County Police as well as the Mount Pleasant Police. Their overriding concern seemed to be to make the whole problem go away. We did eventually, I think, get a good response, but it took significant effort. So I think there's an opportunity there for the police to really interface better with us as a community. I would say I want to leave you with an ask and an offer. So we love our community. We love the people that we live near, and we are committed to making this a better place, and we can be a part of the solution. I've worked for the last 20 years in the area of materials and engineering, and I've had the good fortune to work on everything from child safety in cars to ballistic protection for men and women in uniform. And I'm really inspired by the story of airbags. And I don't know if you know about this story. Airbags save lives, but initially they actually took lives. If you were a young woman, you were small, sitting in the car seat, when it went off, it would actually kill you. And so two things happened in response to this series of deaths. One was public education, and the other was a law on seat bag suppression. Guess which worked faster? Education. So put us to work. Thank you.
That's all I have signed up.
All right. Is there anyone who came to speak who did not get the opportunity to sign up? All right. Oh.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mike Van Horn, Iron Bridge Drive.
I just want to reiterate comments earlier as far as what we need to do to revisit the December 10th meeting. You know, we need to sit here and have some transparency and accountability. You know, I don't know if there's been any disclosures, any of the FOIA requests, you know, and that information, but there needs to be a study to find out what happened. You know, on March 25th, we're going to have a special election to replace Carl Ritchie's seat. You know, we miss him greatly. We wish him well as our sheriff. But, you know, we want to make sure that as we move forward as a town, that we have individuals that are going to be transparent. You know, we have right now, you know, we're looking forward to the opportunity to sit here and have transparency. You know, John, you've talked about as far as, you know, having the meeting minutes posted and all the other things. You know, that's the thing that the town needs in order to sit there and move forward. The transparency, information that we can make informed decisions upon. So the other thing I'm going to ask is also, you know, the mayor, if you can just refrain from your social media antics in the sense of, like your most recent post talks about as far as the anti-SLAPP situation, you know, and in your reference to individuals that are involved in those situations. We need to come together as a community, not continue sitting here pointing fingers at each other. You know, I like every one of you. I've had differences with each and every one of you at some point. So let's draw the line and let's come together. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Perry Ward, 2004 Brickhill Parkway. In November of 2020, Council passed Ordinance number 20065. I believe everybody currently on council, with the exception of Councilman Brownstein and Councilman Icofano, were serving then. That ordinance made amendments to the elevated enclosures or closures for elevated homes. Of course, unfortunately, it says repealed and replaced, but it doesn't give us what language was repealed. But most of the stuff that's written in here is the stuff that everybody's complaining about. It's not just a Liberty Hill issue, by the way. It just happens to be because the fines are getting ready to come to them. It is their issue, but it's going to become an issue town-wide for thousands of homes that are elevated. How this ordinance was written, it appears to be above and beyond federal FEMA requirements. I get it. You're trying to get a reduction in insurance costs, but at the end of the day, at what cost to the homeowner? People that own elevated homes cannot do anything to keep moisture, rodents, anything else out of their house based on how this is written. You've completely tied their hands from being able to do that. This is creating mold, moisture, rodents. I've heard squirrel infestations in subfloors, rat infestations, snakes, you name it. They've even talked about alligators, possums, everything you can name. If council passed this ordinance, then why can't council revisit this ordinance? I think you need to understand if federal requirements will take care of what we need for our insurance, then we should be able to do what we need to safely secure our homes. We're not asking to build rooms underneath the house. We're just asking to be able to enclose it for health and safety reasons to protect our property. And I hope that council, I know it's been asked by multiples, but this is going to become a town-wide problem when they come out and do the next inspection. You have thousands of elevated homes that are feeling the impact of this. So I wish the council will please, whatever committee wants to take it up or who wants to visit it, please address this and allow the citizens to safely and properly secure their home and keep it safe. Thank you.
All right, if there's no one else, that will conclude public comment. Item 7 is consent agenda items. There are no consent agenda items. Item 8 is planning new business. 8A1 is discussion. This is a discussion only with no vote related to a proposed extension of the Patriots Annex development agreement and a proposed plan development district ordinance. Mrs. Reed, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Council. As you said, this is twofold. It's a discussion only for tonight's business. It's for the 5-year extension of the development agreement and then a proposal to replace the waterfront gateway zoning with a planned development. So this property we're talking about is Patriots Annex. It's about 30 acres there in red adjacent to the Yorktown. It is zoned waterfront gateway. In 2019, it was zoned waterfront gateway, which gives it very specific entitlements, as you can see here. It's very specific in the mix of uses that it requires and the phasing of those requirements. In 2019, there was also a height map amendment. Those two things are still in place. Those are ordinances, they are codified, and that's what drives this development right now. At the time, they were required to do an impact assessment and a conceptual plan. The conceptual plan is right here. Again, that was 2019. That has since expired. It was vested for 2 years. What is vested is the zoning and the height map.
If you'll just go back to that for just a second.
Absolutely.
There are only 3 of us up here who were here when this was passed. It passed by a 5-3-1 vote. There was 1 abstention. Mrs. Whitley and I voted against this. I want everybody to take a look at what was proposed in 2019. This is what was passed by council at that time. The reason I say that is I sit on the Patriots Point board, and I've got 7 years of experience looking at this and working on this. And I think to Mr. Bennett's credit, this project has moved in a much more desirable direction. But it's important with anything to have a historical perspective and see where we were now 6 years ago and what was, Mr. Pagliarini, if the right word is, entitled to that property at the time. This is what we had. So use that as a frame of reference because some folks here have not been here nearly that long. So this has progressed, and I think it has moved in a much better direction since then. Thank you.
Yeah, and you're right. It is a conceptual plan. That's when you do an impact assessment. There's always an associated conceptual plan. It's not codified, but it is to provide guidance as they move through the design review process. So, they did go to DRB later, and this plan is vested. So this has a vesting of 2 years. It was recently approved. And the reason we did a master plan, when you have a large development like this, if you just had a commercial development on a piece of property, you'd go to DRB, you'd get your approval. But with a large development like this, we want them to come in. We want to look at the master plan. And that's going to evolve. We know that. DRB knows that. The developer knows that. But you start with kind of a master plan, and then as you phase in, that plan evolves depending on what phase you're in. So they came in, got their DRB approved master plan along with the Seafair Village. So this is that plan that's adopted, and this shows a little bit better with the green spaces. So again, this is a DRB approved master plan, and that is good for 2 years. What's proposed now is a PD that would replace that waterfront gateway zoning. Again, the entitlements that were given when that zoning was put in place are not proposed to change. This plan would be part of a PD, which is different than a master plan or a DRB approved plan. When you adopt a PD, you adopt a zoning map, so it's a little more specific. Here's an illustration of that plan. And then what I wanted to do is really kind of look at a side-by-side of what the current waterfront, yes, sir.
Sorry, can you go back real quick?
Sure,
Yeah,
of course.
thank you.
Right there?
Okay, thank you.
Good. So what I wanted to do is a side-by-side of what the current zoning allows versus what they're proposing in the PD. And these are sort of the main points. Overall tree requirement, currently, you're governed by the village scale pedestrian, which used to be the urban corridor overlay district. You're required to save a minimum or either save or replace. There's no trees there. I'm sure you've all seen it. So you'd have to plant a minimum of 160 inches per acre. What they've proposed in the PD is 80 per acre. The Patriots Point Road buffer, that's a type A buffer. It's typically 10 feet. They are proposing 5 feet. I do want to point out that a roadside buffer can be eliminated through the DRB process when you have a master planned community. That's what this is. So keep that in mind. The open green space is a minimum of 10%. That is not proposed to change, although they are showing 14% in their plan. A waterfront public way, that is not proposed to change, and I want to show you what that is. I'll show it right here. So the waterfront public ways are these right through here. That is required now, and it is not proposed to change. So with the waterfront gateway, that waterfront public walkway,
Excuse me, sorry.
yes, sir.
What's the width on that?
It's right here. So it's a minimum width of 10 feet with an average width of 40 feet, and that's landward of the critical line.
And
That's what's they're entitled to now, and that's what they're proposing to maintain in the plan development. Now, a pedestrian waterfront connection, that's a little bit different. That is right here. So those pedestrian waterfront connections, that's what you see through here. Okay. So those are required by the waterfront gateway, and they are also going to be in the plan development. The only difference is they are proposing a minimum width of 30 feet, but the path minimum would stay the same. Again, I'd like to point out that the number and location of those can be determined through the DRB process. The waterfront critical line buffer is an average width of 35 feet, minimum width of 20. The PD is proposing the same, but with a minimum width of 15. And then the other major change, which really isn't that big, but building site and design. Right now, flat roofs are prohibited and stucco is not allowed as a primary material. They would like to have the ability to do both, and I'd like to point out that DRB can approve those things through the design review process. So those are really, when Mr. Wilson said it was a cut and paste, it really almost was a cut and paste. There are a few things that they're looking to do differently, but it's very minimal, and a lot of these things can evolve through the DRB process. So I just really wanted to kind of point that out to you. Planning Commission recommended approval. You can see here, they recommended approval with some conditions. They wanted to see a broader visual corridor from the lawn to the waterfront. They wanted to prohibit residential uses on the ground floor. Right now, Waterfront Gateway says you can have 12 units an acre. The recommendation was to limit that to 4 units an acre. They wanted them to maximize the boardwalk and walkways for maximum connectivity. Under the building design, they wanted stucco to not be a primary material, but to be a secondary material. And they also wanted to minimize the use of flat roofs. And then to the extent possible, they wanted to see a retention pond. But this is all, things like ponds will get determined through the technical review drainage process. And then last, there was a condition added to the Planning Commission recommendation that they require a 40% tree canopy for the entire site, utilizing native trees, including live oaks. So this was the recommendation that came to the committee, and it comes to you, the Planning Commission, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, and remember this is just for discussion. So I'm just going to suggest let's give the Planning Committee our ideas for something that they can work with, because then I guess when y'all are ready, Mr. Peglerini, when they are ready, because the application has been made.
Yes, sir. It has been through Planning Commission.
Right. So when the Planning Committee is ready, they can take it up and then bring it to full council. So let's try to make our remarks to the committee so that they know something, they've got something to work with. Does that make sense? Okay. Comments? Mr. Chapman?
Yes, sir. I realize that it's somewhat different than we normally do. But I would like to give the council members an opportunity, like we did at the Planning Committee, to ask questions of the developer, because it made it much easier for us to go through the process. And certainly our staff has done a good job of trying to put things together, but it made it much easier for us while we were talking about it to not guess, but to have exactly. And I'll just mention one thing. If you could go back, Ms. Reed, to one of the first slides that showed where the parking lot is and all for the Yorktown.
In the aerial? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Keep going. Right there.
Okay.
One of the questions that was asked was how much space or width was there going to be along the waterfront? How much land was going to be there? And we asked that question of the developer. If you look at this drawing and you see the road coming in to the parking lot near the access to the Yorktown, all of that green space was committed by the developer to be part of the green space. So there's been some things said about, well, we're not getting as much green space as we had before. Well, the answer to that is we are. We are. And it really helped me to be able to ask those questions. And I think Mr. Rambo actually made the motion to bring it to council to get the same kind of opportunity to see what is proposed, to ask those very good questions. The difference between a PD and the zoning for Waterfront Gateway is we get to help make the decisions on what happens in a PD. Once you have a zoning, there is significant entitlement to the developer on what he can do as long as he meets the requirements of the zoning. So the point I'm making is, you know, maybe some people don't want to stay and ask those questions, don't want to prolong the meeting, but if I was someone who wasn't at the committee meeting, I'd sure like to ask those questions. And I realize it's something different. Do we need a vote to do that, Mr. Pagliarini?
No.
Okay. Would any other of the members of council like that opportunity?
Well, let me just say, as the chair, if anyone has a question of Mr. Bennett or his attorney, you can ask him and he can come answer.
Yeah, I'd
Yes,
like
sir.
for them to,
All
I'd
right.
like for them to come up to the podium and address what my fellow council member just said. I just wanted you to be able to.
What do you want? The overall?
Yeah. What I was saying was I wanted due to opportunity to speak to what Mr. Chapman was talking about.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. Thank y'all. I'm Michael Bennett. I'm here with James Wilson, so I'm happy to answer any of the questions you might have. As far as flat roofs, I don't think there's going to be, there's going to be, it's 30 acres of land, so there's going to be multiple buildings, and might there be a flat somewhere? There may be, but that's surely not the intention. The first hotel and the first 10 cottages, which are approved by DRB, there are no flat roofs in that first phase of the development. It's called Seafair. And I would also point out, in that location where we are zoned for 50 feet, for the first 100 feet of our setback, we're building one-story little cottages. So they probably would be, 15 feet or something. So for an additional 100 feet, we're building one-story buildings where we could go 50 feet. So it's a good thing, right? Not unlike the cottages we have over by the golf course. I think the plan in general is, I think it's an incredible plan. It's a pedestrian seaside village. It's Shem Creek. It's the old village. It's what, I think of, Old Mount Pleasant and clapboard siding and porches and where it says Patriot Fountains, those are going to be 1- and 2-story buildings. Again, that entire area could be 50 feet. They're going to be 1- and 2-story buildings, little restaurants, taverns, retail. And I think there's a rendering also, Michelle. I don't know which button to push, so I think y'all saw that rendering. I think it's really special. That's surely the goal, is to make it really special, not to try to maximize what I'm allowed from a volume perspective, which is an acronym called FARC, which is the whatever ratio that tells you your height times your mass, how much square footage you could actually build. is significantly more than what we're proposing. We really are trying to do something that's very looks like Old Mount Pleasant.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Could you address sort of your vision for this area that's right on the water, involving the path, and sort of how you envision that being utilized? And
I think that's roughly about a 40-foot setback. I don't know if that. I don't know if the walkway through there would be, crushed oyster shells or some kind of crushed material, or whether it would be a paved material. I really don't know. I don't know if the town has any guidance for us on that, or what the appropriate use would be. Ultimately, one day we hope it would go to the land next to it, which is where the Medal of Honor is proposed, and then go in front of the Renaissance, go in front of Joe Rice's building, then go in front of Ferry Wharf, go underneath the bridge, tie it back into the waterfront park, and then try to continue weaving it, through all of the Patriots Point. It is the goal of the community, of the town, and ours too. What I was pointing out, you can see where those one-story cottages are in the lower left. We're allowed to go 50 feet there, and we're building one-story cottages for about the first, I estimate it to be about 100 feet. I think that's accurate. And there's a dozen cottages and a little one-story event space. Our version of Alhambra Hall, if you will. And that first building that you see that's faced at a 45-degree diagonal, that's going to get straightened out. I'm going to straighten that building out versus it being on a 45. I think it looks better straight. And those are restaurants there, two-story buildings. And then the grand lawn is in the, we're not required to do a grand lawn. We're required to do 10%. We're doing 40% more than that. Ian Duncan in my office even tells me we're doing more than 14%, but that's what it says on this plan, that we're doing 14%, required to do 10%. And that lawn will be in the center of the property, and will be a great place for families to hang out. Local, we're thinking this is a big locals gathering spot for this seaside pedestrian village we're building. I'm not counting on the visitors to these hotels or to the Yorktown to be able to be the only people we need to make this successful. We're really going after the locals to get this, and the locals being obviously Mount Pleasant, but also Sullivan's Island, people from downtown. It's right across the bridge. I think we got a chance to create a really charming little seaside pedestrian village. And those buildings on that lawn, right where we're zoned for 65 feet, are proposed to be 3 stories. I believe that's what they will stay.
Yes, sir. Mr. Eichfeld.
Are you done, Mr. Brownson?
Oh, I was just going to provide some general, my general comments, if that's the appropriate time, and then I'll be happy to yield to you, Mr. Icofano. I think that there's a lot of benefit to us putting this in a PD and being able to memorialize specifically what's going to be built there. My fear, if it's left as a straight zoning situation, is that this plan could totally change, and those buildings on the water could be 50 feet. The ones in the middle, all 60 feet. They could be consolidated into larger, less interesting buildings. I know Mr. Bennett likely wouldn't do that, but I just believe there's a lot of upside to us negotiating exactly what we want on the site. And I agree with your sentiment that this project has gotten a lot better over the last 6 years. And so those are just my general comments to the planning committee. Thank you.
Mr. Icofano.
Thank you. I'd echo Mr. Brownstein on that. So there was discussion on the lawn being moved from the front to back a little ways. Could you maybe explain that a little bit? So
we always had that. One, we're not required to do a grand lawn. That was an idea we had, and we surely are subject. We surely are entitled to move things around. That was done many years ago. I think the mayor said 6 years ago. And I think this plan is a much better plan. We have a big swath on on the harbor front that's already a good green belt. And then the lawn where it is, we think it's better. It's kind of a central location. The Grand Hotel that we will build, the kind of the main street that overlooks the Grand Lawn, walking toward the seaside village. I think it's beautiful, and I think it's kind of our prerogative to try to help design this thing, and we think strongly that's where that belongs. And keeping in mind, right next to my land, where we have the fountain and that little pedestrian village, the Fort Sumter tour boats have their facility where you queue up to get on the boat. So it's not that land there is not directly on the waterfront. It's got another building and a queuing up station for the Fort Sumter tours.
And you're doing the boardwalk along the front, because I know walking in here I said, can't you make it like 100 or 200 feet like Pineapple thing? But I didn't realize the city paid $80 million or something for that.
Well, the city built the waterfront park in Charleston, and as well as with Union Pier, the city just raised through a TIF district $400 million to put in. That's a gross of 65 acres. Much of that is over the water. So the development portion of that's about 35 acres, and the city's putting in $400 million in that development through a TIF district. We don't have that funding here. I don't.
And you'll be developing that boardwalk there on as part of your project.
You're talking about the walkway.
Yeah, the walkway along the front.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that's going to be crushed oyster shells or crushed rock, or if that's going to be paved tabby-like, hardscape, or I really don't know. I don't think we've decided that yet. That'd be subject to y'all's approval, and I don't know if there's any preferred. I think the walkway in front of Bank of America, I think that's just crushed material. I don't think it's paved. I don't know if this will be crushed materials or paved. I think we can decide that as we move along.
And the last question then becomes, I know we get taxes in lieu of property taxes, I believe, correct? Is there a projection on what this is going to bring in as far as?
I don't know offhand what that fee is. Yeah.
It was
there
provided
an estimate?
Providing all their impact statements. We don't have those today.
And I was talking about, I guess, sales tax and hospitality tax revenue and stuff. Is
and
there a
also
projection on
union.
that? There's no projection on that.
So all that was provided at original approval and their impact assessment.
Okay.
Also on this land, this is state-owned land, and it's a ground lease that we have, unlike Union Pier, which is sold. This is a ground lease, so I'm a tenant here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead. Could we go back to the slide that shows the differences between the waterfront gateway and the PD? Thank you. So I know that Mr. Wilson had said that you all would be totally fine just sticking with the waterfront gateway zoning, right? Like you had said that that'd be fine. And that the original thing was sort of a cut and paste job into the PD. So I guess my question is if we're trying to clean up our zoning code and eliminate waterfront gateway, why not just cut and paste it into the PD and have the PD? If there were to be changes, I feel those changes should be things that are all beneficial to the community and the citizens of Mount Pleasant, and create a better space and place. So some of the things to me seem like changes that don't do that. So I guess this 160 caliper inch per acre tree requirement is cut in half. Why? I mean, what is? I'll just keep going. So that's cut in half. The buffers cut in half.
As Michelle pointed out, those things could all be approved by your DRB. Is that correct, Michelle?
Not the tree requirement, but the buffer.
Or the variance that we request. Also, I would point out, Council Member, you know, where we're entitled to go 50 feet, we're going 15 feet. So I think you're getting more than perhaps you realize what
And would that be
what we're entitled to do
and would
on
that
this
be codified
on this piece of land.
and would that be codified in the PD?
I'm
That
not sure.
15 feet of height, or
I'm not.
whatever it was. That
I don't know
Mr.
what
Wilson would like to address that. Because I guess my question is, you talk about it being a conceptual plan that can evolve and it's going to change over time. So I guess we're coming in with this plan. It could evolve and change over time back to 50 feet, right?
By the way, everything around me is 80 feet. Bank of America, 80 feet. All of Ferry Wharf, 80 feet. Joe Rice Building, 80 feet. Renaissance, 80 feet. The hotels on the other side of me, 80 feet. I'm 50 feet. And a lot of that was done because y'all requested that. You know, you've taken kind of a big bite out of that apple already, and you're not giving yourself credit for having done that. Everything else was 80 feet. We agreed at 50 feet early on because that's what you asked for.
I think
and so to ask for it again, I think is too much.
I think originally actually it was much lower heights than that, and the what passed, which I voted against and the mayor voted against, was giving that 80 feet. It wasn't 80 feet. Am I remembering correctly?
The land around me was
right, but the land
land
that you had was not 80 feet.
Yeah.
That was something that
and I think we,
voted
y'all have done this in a good way. It's lowest on the waterfront, and then it steps up, and where it's going to be 80 feet, where the Grand Patriot Hotel will be, I'm not sure how many feet that is off of the water line. I don't know if it's 500 feet, but it's several blocks away. And by the way, on the other side of that Grand Hotel, guess what's going to be for the next 200 acres? Land that we own too. That's a golf course. That's going to stay as a golf course. So that land stays at zero height, right?
So, Mr. Wilson, could you please answer the question of, if we do adopt the proposed PD requirements, does that fix the current plan in place as far as heights go for 15 feet for that front thing?
And by the way, it's a one-story building. I have
sorry, not 15
personally
feet. Sorry, the
measured it, so
one-story building. Right.
I don't want to.
Mr. Wilson, if you could.
I don't think that does that.
No, the PD itself does not purport to change the height zones. The height zones were, as Mr. Bennett explained, the height zones were adopted by council. That tiers 80, 65, 50. The PD does not purport to change those. Now, the first project, the first building that got unanimous DRB approval, what we've
Are
described
those one-story buildings
and that's what we're trying to move forward and get, break ground, start building this year. So those, assuming that we can press forward with everything, and whether that's under WGC or under this PD, we're planning to press forward this year and do it. That's what will be built, but it's not change. The PD does not purport. We were trying to change as little as possible. Yes, we did make some changes that Michelle has pointed out in your raising, and we've said that multiple times. Every time we've said, we started by cutting and pasting, and then we made some tweaks to that. We think these are good changes that fit with this pedestrian-oriented village. A lot of zoning is kind of more suburban-oriented. We think this concept is great for what we're talking about here. So the changes we proposed, we think, fit very well with that. And we've tried to reach out to really each of you, I think, to say, hey, we're very glad to talk about specific things. It's kind of hard to do all the details in a council meeting like this, but we continue to welcome those conversations and meetings to talk about detail.
I think at the end of the day, the proof's in the pudding, and what we presented to y'all and what we got approved is exactly what I told you it would be, and it's what's on that plan. We're doing a good job. y'all are doing a good job, and it's working really well.
Mr.
I think
Wilson,
trying
you
to
could
handcuff
please
anything.
explain why the tree requirement is being cut in half. Please. Yeah.
Ian Duncan. I'm working with Mike. We are proposing a 150,000 square foot conference center. So it's like 3 acres of building. It would not allow any trees on it. So to meet 160 inches on that particular building would be impossible. So we're trying to spread that out. We're not trying to skimp out on trees or anything. It's just we have a few huge buildings that would preclude.
By the way, it's not that big. The square that square footage is not.
Potentially.
Well, not the one that's on our site would be that big. It would be smaller than that, but it does take up a big footprint. If you if I find it, I'll show it.
Howard, and then yep, Mr. Chapman, and then Mr. Rambo.
Mr. Bennett, during the discussions at the planning committee, it was asked if you could add or would add some live oaks on it, because the drawings we've seen pretty much show only palmetto trees. Can you expound on that a little bit? Because I like
I
what
wish
I heard.
Seaman Whiteside is our engineering and land planner, and I don't think Gary or Abigail are here. I think we'd plan them where we can. I don't know if we can plant them in sidewalks or not, because long term they tear up the sidewalk in the street. But I like live oak trees. I've planted a lot of them in my life. In fact, I planted 400 of them that I could transplant to use. They're about 15 years old that I could transplant to use, which I plan to, where they fit in here. I can't tell you where that is, because I don't think we've done that. I don't think we have a plan to where those trees are going to go.
No, I understand. I understand that. But the point is that you're not just using palmetto trees. There will be other species there which will allow a larger caliper tree as well as additional.
Whatever trees we plant obviously have to be approved by ultimately the town. For the first hotel, council member, I don't remember what got approved from a tree perspective. Did the trees get approved for the first hotel?
Yes, we've submitted to DRB and TRC. We've been approved for Seafair using the requirements of the town. The idea is that we just want a boulevard of palms, not unlike Coleman. It's a seaside village, right? Palmettos scream seaside village. That's really all we want to do, is be able to do a streetscape of palmettos, not unlike Coleman Boulevard. Have that be an iconic 1,500-foot linear, palm boulevard, and just have the freedom to do some interesting design.
I can't see it.
I would concur with James. A lot of these things seem suburban,
right?
And this is not a suburban project.
I was trying to do that rendering, but it kind of faded.
I've got one more question.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
With that drawing, when Ms. Reed showed the view to the water, I think she only showed 3 locations. I think when you presented to us, Mr. Bennett, you counted at least 4, and may have been 5.
I know we added one more from the previous plan that got approved 6 years ago. We have one additional one, so whether it was 4 and 3 or 3 and 2, yeah, that might help me.
And
now.
Mr.
So
Chapman,
there's 1,
I
2,
wasn't
3.
counting them. I was just showing an example of what that was.
Right.
So I apologize.
So I don't know if you
You
want
can
to
draw on that.
with my finger.
Yes.
So I think that's not, is it drawing up now?
You can just do this.
Yeah, you draw them for me. One's there.
One's there.
One's there.
Uh-huh.
One's here.
One's there.
Right. And then is there one between my building and the PPDA? One there. So
that's
I
at
think
least 4.
I think that's what that shows.
Yeah, and that's what I remember when you were before the planning committee.
It's one more than what the previous plan
Right.
was, is my recollection.
Thank you. I'm finished here.
Okay, Mr. Rambo.
Miss Reed, can you please go back to the slide between the differences?
Which one?
And the slide that shows the differences. And I thank you for putting that together, because if you weren't at the planning committee meeting, that the vast majority of our questions really had to do with what are the differences between the two. And so I think this really clarifies it. I am, I'm not a fan of reducing from 160 inches per acre to 80 inches per acre. I mean, I do have a follow-up question from Ms. Whitley's question on that, because I know you talked about the larger building being multiple acres, so you can't do that. I thought when you had a large development, if you say 160 calibrations per acre. That's just taking the total acreage of the development, and some acres might have to have a lot more than that, and some acres can have less than that. So I don't see how one big building would impact not having trees on the rest of the.
Well, I think it does
So
take
that's a
away about
question.
10% of that land to try to put trees on.
We would just say that I think that is quite a suburban requirement, right? Like for a subdivision, that makes a lot of
And
sense.
we are a suburb.
Well, this is a
This is a fishing village.
Right?
I get that your vision is different than my vision for the town.
I don't
but
think of it as a suburb.
Mount Pleasant is a suburb, and so that's where with all due respect, I'm really asking this question to staff. So
What's the difference in I wish I had my landscape team here, council member. I hear you. I don't think I've got a different answer for you.
Yeah. Ms. Reed, do you have an answer, or Mr. Pagarini?
Question is specifically about spreading out the.
Yeah. So if the reason they can't do 60 inches per acre is because there's one larger building, again, my question is, if it's 10 acres, I don't know what it is. Let's just say it's 10 acres, then that would require 1,600 at some.
It's across the property.
Yeah, across the property. So why does one big building affect that?
Your interpretation is correct.
Okay.
I will say that the 160 inch per acre is just a straight for commercial subdivisions and stuff. I don't know how it is when you apply it to a master plan like this. I don't know. So but it is intended for commercial properties and subdivisions. So I'll just leave it at that. But your interpretation is correct that it's the overall development, not 160 on each acre.
Okay.
As long as the
Thank you.
And in the interest of time, these are the things we need to take note of. We're not going to get all the answers tonight. So, Ms. Hyatt, were you asking?
By the way, like on the Grand Lawn, council member, we could load that up with trees, right?
100, yeah.
And yet it might look better as a Grand Lawn with 4 oak trees.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to putting 20 in there to meet the requirement.
Yeah, I understand.
So I think we probably have the land to meet the requirement, but and I've planted over 400,000 trees in my lifetime. I like planting trees, and where they're appropriate, we go plant them.
I would just mention Shem Creek has 0 trees, right? Very successful, very friendly to the town. People love it. That's kind of what we're going for. Is Shem Creek waterfront village up there where trees can go. We certainly put them because they are valuable.
All right, Ms. Hyatt.
For public parking, I know you're saying you want to encourage locals to show up. So where are they just going to park? Where would they be allowed to park? Because when you have hotels and you have conference centers and things are set aside for your businesses, where will the public have access to easily park?
Right now, and the first thing we did was we built a big parking lot, right? So
yeah,
you can see that parking lot. I think that's about 370 cars.
So that'll always be open to the public?
On this plan, somebody help me. I think there's about 750 to 800 surface parking spaces.
That sounds.
At one point, we had a lot of office buildings here. And we did away with the office buildings. And with that, we did away with the need for about 2,000 parking spaces, and we were going to have some parking garages. So creating this little more of a village feel versus 500,000 square feet of office space, not only made it, I think, a development we all like better, but it eliminated the need for those parking garages and for that many parking spaces. So we'll work under the ULI guidelines. You get some cross utilization from a parking space. Some of them are used at night. Some of them are used during the day, and they're scattered around the site. Council member, if you can see, you got the big parking there. Up above the Grand Patriot, you can see the double row of parking all the way there. Underneath that commercial office conference, there's parking under that building. And then you can see the various pockets of parking around the Seafair Hotel, around right before right next to the Patriots, where it says Patriots Fountain, and then on either side of the Grand Lawn, you see this two little pocket parking areas. So they're kind of spread around a little bit. I think they look good that way, and we surely have to meet whatever the parking code.
Now, where's the
that we have to
parking
have.
for the Yorktown going to be? That's all.
Yeah, it's going to be on the site also.
Okay,
It's in
so you
that
got to
big parking
accommodate.
lot right there.
Yeah, so the public and the Yorktown. have to be
Whatever
accommodated.
the parking requirement is, we have to meet it.
Right.
And we can't build it unless we meet it.
I just know the experience with the Hilton. You can't even park if you're not staying in the hotel. You can't park there. That's how I would get all those cars along the side of the road at Patriots Point. If you even try to go to a party at the Point event that you have a ticket to, there's nowhere to park.
You know, a parking garage over by those tennis courts, I think, was a great idea. And you know, we're going to have to provide parking for the requirements that we have. That's something we have to do.
Councilmember Hyde, just answer your question. Yes, public parking. That's actually part of our lease with the PPDA is that we will provide public visitor parking. So yes, that'll be open to all.
But if I can clarify,
Yeah.
you're talking about parking for all of Patriots Point. Patriot Annex is only going to have to meet for Patriot Annex.
Yeah.
We still have a huge parking problem over there, which we were trying to address, and we still need to address.
Yeah,
I just know
But
over
this will
time-
not absorb all of that parking for Party at the Point or for our soccer, events and stuff.
Right. I'm just saying over time, the Hilton has eliminated public parking basically because they need to accommodate their guests. So I just don't know what would be guaranteed basically is what I'm saying for the public because over time things can chip away.
You know, there needs to be
You're
parking.
accommodating
There needs to be
hotels.
parking at Patriots.
Yeah.
It needs it, and I can't provide all of it. And I think it's a good idea to try to do it, but I'll let y'all figure that out.
And if I may, we had this conversation before. This is an area that we have addressed in our strategic economic development plan. I don't think that your vision for this is another King Street where every business, every retailer, every restaurant is a chain from somewhere else.
Correct.
And
I would
asked
say
you
that
before,
would be
you
very
have small spaces in there for local coffee shops and
absolutely
sandwich shops. And,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
That's surely the dream and the goal. Might there be a national retailer that goes in there? Sure.
Understand.
That'd be okay too, right? If they were the kind we wanted. Yeah, we can have various sizes of spaces, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
So there'll be, it can accommodate all sorts and sizes of businesses and hopefully a lot of locally owned businesses.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you for not having those parking garages. That was a big stickler for me. And I think this is much improved. Let me ask the committee chair, or the committee members, do y'all feel like did this accomplish anything? I mean, I don't know how long. I lost track of time, but it's been a long
I still have
conversation.
one more question,
Sure.
but just for Miss Reed. I think I'm finished with. I don't know if anyone else has questions for Mr. Bennett, but I think.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for being here and thank you for your answers.
I guess my question is, if we do adopt the PD as presented, this proposed plan, how fixed is it? Is it codified in the PD? Like, this is what we're going to get? Because the whole point of a PD is that we get what we want, right? Like it's a negotiated sort of thing. So like my fundamental question is if we say yes to the dress, do we get this?
When you adopt a PD, you adopt a zoning map. The zoning are those the same uses that are part of the waterfront gateway, okay? So the zoning are these uses. Now, it depends. Some PDs say we're going to put a hotel right here and we're going to put a office here. Very specific. That is not what's proposed in this. The zoning is proposed to stay the same. Those entitlements, those uses. This is not a zoning map that's along with it. Now, can you lock in certain things with that? Could you lock in with a PD saying, we really want to see that grand lawn there in the center, and we really do want to see that waterfront expanded a little bit? Those are the kind of things you can get. But to lock it in on this, to say, this is the hotel, this right there is going to be this, that's different. a zoning map with a PD is this is AB, this is ED, this is residential.
I see. So
You
I
see?
guess like if we can go back to the page that shows the differences,
Yes.
because the design as stands is 14%, showing 14%. So why not codify that, right? Because it could always drop back down to 10% if we have it as set that way. I think I'm with Mr. Rambo. I mean, cutting the tree caliper inch per acre in half seems rather extreme, a very big difference. And then I guess I fundamentally go back to my question, which is if, as Mr. Wilson said, they're comfortable with the WGC zoning requirements, why not just cut and paste that into the PD and be done with it, right? Like each of these changes, well, how does each of these individual changes benefit our community and not, you know what I mean? That's what I'm fundamentally asking. And I don't know, and I think that's something that we as a council have to discuss, right? Like we didn't want flat roofs because flat roofs are permitted. What percentage is permitted? Could they all just suddenly be flat roofs? I know that would probably never happen. Stucco, why was stucco never allowed as a primary material? Why would allowing it now? Is it a cheaper material, less attractive material? I don't know. So I think, and this open area minimum width of 30 feet going down to 20 feet, and then this cutting the buffer down to 5 feet. If those can be changed through DRB process, why not leave them where they are in the wider place? And if they want to lower them, then go through the DRB process. So for me, I hesitate to. I'm comfortable adopting the WGC zoning requirements straight into the PD and leaving it as is. I think if we're going to accept some of these changes in the proposed PD requirements, we need to codify to ensure that we get something that is, I mean, like there was talk of like, oh, well, this is going to be a lower height, but I could go to 50. Well, then maybe we need to codify that it's going to be that lower height, right? Like, because it could still go to 50 because this proposed PD, as you said, is not, we don't get that. That's just a plan that can evolve with time. So that's my concern, is that if all we're getting is a concept that can evolve with time, we may adopt a concept that seems really cool and we really like it, and that may not be what we actually get in the end. And that's what I'm not comfortable with.
That's all.
Anything else? Yes.
Now, we're supposed to talk about our zoning code today, which would eliminate Waterfront Gateway. Is that part of that?
No.
No, it's going to be voted on separately.
No, it's still in there because this didn't come through.
That's what I thought.
A timely fashion. So
that
it's still
won't
in
be
there.
eliminated until
No.
this is resolved.
Unless this is resolved. Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll stay in there, and it'll move forward as it is, so they can move forward in that zoning. Absolutely.
Okay, I was afraid that was going away if we voted
No.
tonight.
No.
Okay. So there's no motion to have.
Yes, sir.
I just have one thing. I 3 years on council now, and there's a good point that's being brought up here, which is, you know, with the PUD in Carolina Park, or maybe that's Park West, approved I don't know how many years ago, and then those big walls are going up on Faison Road, and this is the council that's being determined that made that happen because that's when the walls went up, and we can't do anything about that, right? So I believe in property rights and that you have the rights to build within certain parameters on a property, but I also can see how whatever we're voting on or deciding today is something that another council could be dealing with in 10 or 20 years, and their hands are tied. And I think we need to make sure that the vision that we're looking for kind of stays in place. So I think there's a delicate balance there. I also know that we have a council retreat coming up in a few weeks. I think it's a great subject for that as well, as we've got people out here. So.
Okay, we are almost 2 hours into the meeting, and we have finished our first item of business for the night.
That was the big one.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Bennett and team, and thank you, Ms. Reed. So that was discussion and discussion only. So item 2 is a first reading. Item 3 is a first reading. Both have been withdrawn by the applicant, but we are memorializing that they were on the agenda and the applicant did withdraw. Are we correct?
That is absolutely correct, and no action is necessary.
Thank you very much. So this moves us to item 4, which is a first reading on something on Wando Park Boulevard in Bellhome.
I'll move for approval, Mayor.
Okay. We have a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second. We are in discussion. Please notice that the Planning Commission and the Planning Committee both recommended approval. Any discussion? All right. All in favor? Aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
First reading ordinance number 25001.
Item 5 is first reading to rezone from office professional to AB area-wide business, a half acre on Mathis Ferry Road. Just for, there you go. I was going to say where it is, but you got
Across
it.
from
Thank you.
LTP. Yeah. Again, Planning Commission.
Move
and
to approve.
Planning Committee
Second.
recommended approval.
All right. We have a motion to approve and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes,
All in-
sir.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry.
Ms. Reed, could you explain the, the commitment by the applicant to not do anything else in terms of where this AD is going to be used? Behind the building?
Sure. So this historically was a construction office. It's actually 2 buildings on the site. That's looking at it from the street view. There's the aerial. So you can see the building in the back. Historically, it was a construction office in the front. They had their offices in the back. They stored equipment. They have since sold it, and a veterinary's office is operating there. It's all a permitted use. They are operating in the front, but they don't have any use for that back structure. So they'd like to lease it out for some sort of flex space. Flex would not be permitted, but the rezoning is appropriate for the comp plan, and it's appropriate. It backs up to a storage facility, AB2, so the AB is a less intense use. And so that's what they'd like to do. They're going to continue to operate. And if there were any redevelopment there, they would have to install this or make a 50% improvement to the property. They would have to install this 50-foot Mathis Ferry Road side buffer. But as of now, it's operating as a veterinary's office, and they'd like to continue to do that.
Yes, sir.
Being so close to the high school, are we opening up any unintended consequences with this vote, I guess?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No.
The reason I asked that question is because I'm very particular about what goes on Mathis Ferry Road, especially since it's a historic road. So as long as we have that commitment as part of this, I'm fine with it. Otherwise, I would have voted against it. But I'm okay with it as long as we have that commitment from the veterinarian that's there on the building site.
All right. The motion is to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
First reading ordinance number 25002.
Right. Item number 6 is first reading. This is a limited office district, 0.86 acres on Highway 17 North.
Yeah, this recently actually annexed in, and it was given the automatic zoning of residential. What they would like to do now is rezone it to limited office. It makes sense. It's recommended for the comp plan. It's also in the Sweetgrass Basket Overlay District, so it would be within that designation. You can see the adjacent properties down there are actually office professional. So the limited office is a less intense zoning.
And for reference, right here where this would be where Beacon Bank is that right?
Yes.
And it's Boone Hall across
Yep.
the way. So this is, I'm trying to figure out if this is the old budget rental place or
I think it's
somewhere in there.
I was trying to look at the area. I was trying to look at the street view, and I was confused as well because my map was a couple years old. But I think it's adjacent to that. Actually.
It is. I see that now.
Yeah. That's what you can see here. And that's all I have.
All right. Do we have a motion, please?
Move for approval.
To approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimous.
First reading ordinance number 25003.
Item 7 is a annexation of a 1.17 acre tract of land on Halls Pond Road.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
First reading ordinance number 25004.
And
Right,
then
let's
last, yeah,
move
I'm
to
sorry.
the last one under new business, which is a community conservation district of 1.17, please.
Yeah. If this were to automatically come in, it would be assigned R1. They actually want to go CC, which is a less intense, 12,500 square foot lots as opposed to 10,000. And so they would like to request that CC zoning.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Yes, sir. Mr. Chapman.
Where is the access for this going to be? Hopefully not on Hungry Neck.
No, absolutely not. Hawes Pond Road.
That little cul-de-sac right there, that
Yeah.
circle. Thank
Hungry
you.
Neck has an access management plan associated with it within that overlay, and so access is really restricted through that area. So they would have access through Halls Pond.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
First reading ordinance number 25005.
All right, this takes us into section B, item 1, which is our zoning code, an ordinance to repeal and replace chapter 156 zoning code of the town of Mount Pleasant. Planning Commission recommended approval with modifications. Planning Committee recommended approval with modifications.
Motion to
I'd
approve.
like to move to approve replacing chapter 156 of the zoning code, including all planning committee recommended modifications.
Second.
Let me check parliamentary wise.
Kelly, do you want to take us through?
Did we need a motion to approve and then to amend?
No, sir. I think
With
the approval with the
recommendations is fine.
recommendations is
That's good
appropriate.
enough.
That's
Thank
what
you.
was brought
Thank you.
forward from committee.
Got it, yes. So the motion is to approve, including all, did you say? All amendments from the planning committee. And did I hear a second?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Chapman?
So,
Yes, sir.
so are we going straight from the committee recommendations straight into this in the second reading? And they weren't part of first reading, is that correct? First part.
It was included in first reading. It was brought forward from committee to first reading.
Just clarifying that there wasn't another meeting that changed and came in between the two. Okay, all right. That's what it sounded like, sorry. Thank you.
And Mayor,
Yes,
if I
sir.
could speak. I know we heard some comments about whether or not to help the trees. Having been on the first tree commission this town ever had, and one who knows we need to do better with our tree canopy, I'm so glad that we're going forward with this. I know there have been some objections to it, but we've lost too many trees in this town. This gives us an opportunity to keep more that we need. And I would like to have an arborist talk about why we're keeping some pine trees and others allowing to be cut down.
Are you asking him to come forward to answer questions? Yes, all right, then you may. Mr. Bernard?
We're doing pine trees.
Howard, was your question more about size or was it about species or both?
Species and size.
Yeah. Well, there was concern with the public about just the fact that there was, well, primarily a lot of large pines coming down in older neighborhoods. But, of course, there's concerns about, the pines and on the northern part of town, which were primarily planted for pulpwood and then later turned to development. So, so those are the ones that are getting cleared and are much more brittle, I guess, than an open grown pine that might be in an established neighborhood from 20, 30, 50 years ago. So the concern with the public was just the fact that we weren't protecting any pines, and that again, a lot of large pines were coming down just for no real reason other than the fact they were pines. So the thought was, as a compromise of sorts, I guess, is to protect something. We elected to to look at protecting 24 and larger versus the normal 16 on, say, a residential property. So, with the thought there that most of your forest grown pines, or very few of them, would be that large, and just with our knowledge of the distribution of pines and the sizes of them, that the vast majority of those are in the older developed parts of town on sandier soils.
Thank you.
Mr.
I'll start on this end.
Okay.
Work this way. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question about the tree protection zones. My understanding is that this zoning code would increase their size. How does that compare to what our neighboring municipalities do? Do they require tree protection zones of a similar size as to what's in this plan?
Most do. I mean, the city of Charleston's a little different. Theirs is it depends on a lot of things based on the size of the tree, but I mean the county is a foot per inch of tree. A lot of the other neighboring, we don't have that. Yeah, I can't recite them all off the top of my head, but the majority of them are in that range or exceed what we are.
And then I sort of have a procedural question, I think, for you, Mr. Pagliarini. One of the planning committee's recommendations was to eliminate the cottage courts as an allowed use. Is there a way to pull that out and debate that one separately from the main motion? Do I offer an amendment? How can I get that back on the table?
Right. Yes, sir. There's a main motion on the floor. Now is the appropriate time for any amendments.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to offer an amendment to keep cottage courts in the zoning code rewrite that's being contemplated now.
Second.
And I think something about cottage courts has kind of gotten lost in translation. My understanding is that it would only be allowed in a multi-family zoned piece of property. Is that correct, Ms. Reed?
That's correct. If you can do an apartment, you can do a cottage court.
Okay, so I think, with those options of people having a condo building or an apartment building on a piece of land, I would think to a great deal of them, cottage courts would be a preferable thing to be on that piece of property. And so I'd hope that we would reconsider. I think there are some benefits to it. I think it allows our residents to age in place here in Mount Pleasant, also potentially allows some younger folks an opportunity at housing. And so I just see this as a benefit to our town. It includes a lot of green space versus a lot that's highly covered by a structure. So I'd ask that we reconsider that and keep that in the current plan.
With this cottage court, so we're talking about a piece of land in which an apartment can go, right? So this is a cottage court is less dense or more dense than what is given to the property right owner or the property owner's rights.
I'm gonna let Kelly speak to this.
And while she's getting up, I guess, I know there was discussion at one point that saying, hey, these things are going to sell for $1 million. This doesn't help attainable housing. I understand that sometimes you're looking, first of all, I think you have to put some of it, the percentage has to be attainable housing, I believe, on the cottage courts, correct?
Correct.
And then with that, reality is this, there's houses in Mount Pleasant that are worth $3 million. There just are. Somebody may be selling a 3,600 square foot house worth $3 million, and they want to stay in the town of Mount Pleasant, and they're downsizing to a cottage court that costs $1 million because they want to be on one level. So I understand attainable housing, and I understand that $1 million does sound like a lot of money, but for somebody selling a $3 million house that wants to downsize, stay in the town of Mount Pleasant, go to a 1,000 square foot house and be on one level, maybe that's attainable to them. And this is less dense, and I've seen the pictures. It's got great green space, and they look beautiful to me. Especially if it's not some, huge apartment. But go ahead. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Kelly Cousineau.
That's not what they look like.
Michelle, what happened?
That's a song.
That's a song.
I lost it.
Mic drop.
So the current draft allows a maximum of 8 cottage dwellings in a cottage court. It does say that the maximum density for the zoning district does not apply, but when you do the math, and if I can get to, so there are some dimensional standards for both the overall site area as well as the individual cottage lots. And
Are you seeing a map? Because all we're seeing is like a point maker on it's like a placeholder.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the screens out here is working. I wasn't sure what you all saw.
None of our screens is working.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, while we're waiting for that, I just want to ask, do we still have people who go around and monitor the companies that are trimming our trees? Because I see some of these trees butchered, and it just really breaks my heart to see that. So is there a penalty for them to do that, or is somebody watching them to make sure that they, trim them back and they're still, a beautiful tree instead of watching them all being butchered?
I assume you're referring to aerial power line pruning, or are you talking about pruning in general?
Both.
Well, the aerial power line, yes. I'm watching behind. I mean, we have Dominion, both the transmission and distribution groups are pruning currently. So Ben Sawyer's where they were Sunday, and will again be 2 Sundays from now. But so yeah, I'm watching that. I mean, it's. I don't think anybody will say it looks great, but I mean, it is. They are pruning for the most part how they're supposed to be. There are some minor things, stub cuts and things that I've had them go back and correct and where they can. So yeah, they're being monitored as far as like just the average homeowner getting work done in their yard. I mean, we don't necessarily monitor that, but if you see something that's being done incorrectly, then certainly we have the ability to address that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we've got our technology working.
Yes.
So
So as I was saying, the code doesn't limit the maximum density for the zoning district, which in this case is the RM, or currently multifamily district. It's being renamed. So that doesn't apply, but these other dimensional standards do. And so I took a look. I just looked at a conceptual 4-unit cottage court as well as an 8-unit cottage court. And I just found it again. Using the proposed standards, a 4-unit cottage court would require a site that is approximately 32,800 square feet. So with 4 dwelling units on that, that's about 5.3 dwelling units per acre, which is below the maximum density of 9 dwelling units per acre in RM. If you look at an 8-unit cottage court, which again is the maximum number of units allowed in a cottage court, you'd need a site that is a little over an acre, 47,500 square feet, which is about 7.3 dwelling units per acre versus the 9 that is allowed in the district. So theoretically, a cottage court could be slightly less dense than an apartment complex, and it is required to have more open space.
yes, ma'am.
I'm trying to remember. This is kind of morphed over time with the recommendations from committee and then commission, and then we decided it would be better to do without them for now. But didn't it start out at 6 per plan, and then we bumped it up to 8 because we wanted to make 2 affordable? Was that the process? Originally, it was going to be 6 units.
I don't recall.
Okay.
But it definitely has changed.
It has
based on input
changed.
from the commission and the committee.
So just my thought on us not having this in the zoning code right now is because I feel like there's too many details to figure out how many in town might we end up with, that sort of thing. So it's not the kind of thing that we can't revisit in the future, to where we're really sure and don't regret anything that we're deciding on. So that was kind of the reason for me to take it out for now, and that we could really take a lot of consideration to making sure, how many in town, how close, how many units per acre, that sort of thing. So that was just the thought process behind the fact that we don't need it now. We could talk about it later.
Mr. Rambo.
But so I just need to clarify the motion on the table. So it's a motion to amend, but it's just to allow the cottage courts in multifamily.
Yes.
That does not include the R3.
Correct. Yeah, it was already removed.
So
it was proposed.
the only
originally.
properties we have currently zoned multifamily have large apartment complexes on them. So I guess we would be putting something in there that wouldn't be used. I mean, like the whole purpose of rewriting the zoning code was to clean things up, make it more streamlined, make sure people understand exactly what they can do with their property. There's no properties, unless council, I guess, decided to rezone one multifamily that could do one of these. So I guess I just don't see the practical purpose in keeping them because they're not going to get built. Nobody's going to build this when they can build an apartment building just from pure finances.
I would disagree, and I'll go ahead and weigh in. My wife and I personify what the sandwich generation is now. We have two daughters who live in this area. One who might be giving birth tonight, by the way, and to our first grandchild. So very excited about that. But both of our daughters, and they're both well employed and everything, would love to live in Mount Pleasant and consider it, their hometown, and they can't. I mean, it's just, what are we at now? $1.4 million the last few months was the median single family home sale price. Go to any high school, go to a high school football game, look at all those teenagers. None of them will be living in their hometown for the next 10, 15 years unless they're lucky. And then on the other hand, in the last 60 days, had to, on an emergency basis, move my 90-year-old father and my 89-year-old mother to Mount Pleasant to be in memory care. If we had had cottage courts, my parents would have been here years ago. On a single level. And when I walk around and think about what looks more like Mount Pleasant, three, 4-story apartment buildings or cottage courts, it's cottage courts every day. So this is a quality of life issue for me. And I have a long record. I'm not a big development guy, but I would much rather have cottage courts than apartment buildings. And I think that some neighborhoods that have some multifamily in them, and I know that there are some, would probably choose this option, and I think it would look a lot more like Mount Pleasant, and I think it would keep a lot of families able to stay together in the town they love, which is Mount Pleasant. So I'm intending to vote for this. Yes, sir.
I have just one more follow-up. I mean, I agree, Mr. Mayor, with everything you're saying. I think the disconnect is that, so if somebody, I just want to make sure I would understand the process for somebody getting a cottage court, because they're not going to fit on any multifamily properties that are already zoned that way because there's already apartment buildings on them. So somebody would come and they would get a rezoning. They would have to get a rezoning for multifamily, and they could present that we're going to do a cottage court. It's going to be multifamily, but once we rezone it multifamily, they would have the rights to build full apartment buildings. They wouldn't have to actually be held to the fact that they told us they were going to build a cottage court. I mean, that's happened to us a number of times. Somebody says, oh, we're just going to do this little small business and we need AB. And then they build a 60-foot hotel. They basically just come in and lie to us so they get the zoning. I definitely see that happening with this. Oh, I'm going to build these cute little affordable cottage courts. Here's your multifamily zoning. And we get a large apartment complex. So,
anyone else? Right. The motion is to keep cottage courts only allowed in multifamily, and the percentage is stated that has to be attainable. That's part of the motion as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Do we need to do a roll call? How many no's do we have?
That would be a tie.
How many no's do we have?
I think 4.
4 and 4, I think.
4 and 4. So if it's 4 and 4, the motion fails then, because
she needs to know who did what.
Okay. All right. The no's are Mr. Chapman, Ms. Hyatt, basically the planning committee, and the other 4 are. I think y'all planned this.
Mayor,
I just want to say, so the motion fails. Wait, the motion fails. But this is something we need to look into, y'all, because we're talking about families here. And I'm in the thick of this right now. and I can get very emotional about it, but please don't just throw out the worst case scenario and say under no circumstances can we find a way to do this, because it really affects families like mine right now. Thank you.
All I want to say is, Ms. Hyatt already said it. We don't have enough time tonight to massage this to get it where it needs to be. We can bring it back up and then figure out the best way to do it. I
would
think it needs.
appreciate that.
I think it needs to be done. We just didn't spend enough time figuring out the best way to do it.
Okay, so we're back to the primary motion, which is to approve this, including all amendments from the planning committee. Right. Yes, sir, Mr. Rambo.
I have a question about when this goes into effect. We had a number of comments tonight. I had some phone calls too about people who already have plans. They've been going through the DRT process diligently. They've spent lots of money developing these plans based on our zoning code. Maybe they're not vested yet because technically I think a commercial project is vested once it has DRB approval. Is that correct? And then a residential project would be vested when?
Permit. But
once they pull a permit.
Right.
So if we make this in effect like tonight, somebody could have been working with our staff for months, done lots of plans and work, but they don't have a permit yet. So now they've got to go back and repay to do all of those plans again. That's the concern that I'm getting. And I don't think that's fair business practice on our part. So I don't know if we need to make this in effect in 90 days or for new applications received. I guess I'm looking for guidance on the best way to handle that.
Why don't we let legal, that's a legal question.
So the way that this is currently written is immediate effect. As you alluded to, sir, there is the South Carolina vested rights statute, which would be in process. The rights are vested. But if you wanted to grant lead time for it, there's no in between, meaning I don't believe it's appropriate to say anyone who's at least sent a submittal or has plans in place, that would be appropriate. It'd be too difficult to parse. But if you wanted to delay it, then you could delay it. But I don't see a way that would say we're going to allow certain people who are at such stage to be not subject to the rules. That's the challenge.
Well, with that, I will I'll have a comment after I do this, but I'll make a motion to amend to include a 90-day lead time. Is that the correct phrasing?
What I would recommend is that we pick a date if that is your motion. So, of course, it could be.
So effective date for the whole zoning code, if it passes.
That would be
right. Just for the tree part.
No, it would be for the whole. It would be for the whole thing. So I'll just throw out what January, at the end of April.
So
it's a little bit
April
more.
30th.
So May 1st.
Yes, May 1st effective date.
May 1st.
And again, the reason I say that is, I mean, people have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on design plans and architectural plans, and they're this close to getting a permit. And some of these new regulations could really mess with that. And so I think that's, I'm a fan of all the new regulations, but I just think that that's not very fair and it's not good practice. So.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second discussion. Yes, Ms. Hyatt.
I'm not sure how that's going to solve the problem, because people could still start applying for things and then say they're in the middle, and then we mess them up because it got changed. And I mean, seems like no matter when we do it, there are going to be people in process. So is there another way we can address that? People can come and ask for an extension so they don't have to pay again for
staff does
permits?
not have the authority, nor really,
or
nor
council even,
to vote
the way
on,
we extend things.
right, to vote on an extension to an ordinance. I guess there's two ways to look at it, and one is exactly as you said, Ms. Hyatt, that that this that there's always going to be people. And in fact, this has been in process for several
How many years?
So, but we deal with this mostly with every ordinance we deal with. Of course, the other side of that, I think, as Mr. Rambo's getting to, is that, at least there's final notice that you can wrap up at least what you're doing. So those are the ways to look at it. It's the in-between part to grant specific waivers for individuals becomes a significant problem. I don't know of a way to do that outside of what the state and the town have already codified in the Vested Rights Act.
So this doesn't really solve the problem if we extend it, because there's always going to be somebody in process.
Well, ma'am, I'll say that depends on which side of it you're looking at.
It takes more than 90 days to get through the process.
I think what Mr. Rambo's saying is it's not that there's going to be someone in process, that it gives them time to complete, right? Like if you are in process now and you pull your permit or you complete your, it's 90 days for people to complete. It is not so that someone can start on day 89 and be like, oh, now I'm in process. That's not what he's saying, because that's what the effect would be, is that it would enable people to complete. For me, I have heartburn about protecting pine trees. I really do. I think we are creating a weird incentive because pine trees become protected at 24 inches.
Can I stop you there? Because we do have a motion.
I've got one thing on his motion.
We do have a motion
sorry,
that we have to,
okay,
we're in discussion just on this motion.
If we're going to talk, I'd like to talk about that motion, if you don't mind.
Mr. Rambo's?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely.
I don't, Mr. Pagliarini, I'm not an attorney, but I think, I don't think you can tell them they've got to finish it in 90 days. I think if you're in process, you're in process, whether that takes you 180 days or not. If you're in the process and in the approval process, is that not correct? You can't pull that. If that takes 180 days to complete, you can't pull that rug out the project, right?
What process?
What he's saying, 90 days to complete whatever. This is a very large ordinance that we are passing here. So there may be things that take 120 days. So if I'm held up on tile to complete my project.
Well, that's precisely my point.
Right.
Is that
You're saying if
so many circumstances.
Right. If there, I guess what I thought he was making the motion was you've got 90 days to get yourself in order, and if you want to submit stuff, you get to submit stuff. But once you're in process, you're in process. But you're saying you get 90 days to complete. I don't know that we can determine how quickly somebody can complete something.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
So the reasoning behind that is not so that somebody who is about to apply, or even somebody that just applied last week and just had their initial DRT meeting or whatever last week, can finish the process. This is so people that are like almost at the finish line, this gives them the time to finish without having to completely restart or redo their plans based on new zoning. It's to allow, to me, 90 days gives the time to allow the people who are most of the way through the process already to finish, and the people who are maybe right at the beginning or haven't quite applied yet will not have the time to finish. They're going to have to go ahead and do their plans based on the new code. So that's the purpose of that.
I like giving people notice that something's going through. You change a handbook, you got to give 2 weeks notice, at least minimum by law, right? You've got, people do price increases. They give a notice to let people know it's coming through. So that's what I thought more that you were saying, hey, I'm going to give you 30-day notice that this is going to take effect in 30 days. But if you're in the process, you're in the process. So I'm afraid of, I guess I'm afraid of staff having to deal with people that said, listen, I know you guys said 90 days, but then this got held up and now I'm on day 92 and now my project's gone. Like that's all I see happening. If you're you're in it and you get delayed for some kind of plumbing, the plumber's sick, and then all of a sudden your project,
you would already have a permit at that point.
Okay. So you're just saying,
okay. This is before you either get your DRB approval or your permit. This is not like a building inspection is being held up.
Right.
This is the permitting and approval, a zoning approval process. This has nothing to do with
just clarifying
the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
My understanding is this would just allow people already in the pipeline to potentially complete without having to go back to the drawing board at great expense to comply with the new zoning code.
Correct. So then my question is for staff: is that going to be successful? We don't want to put them in a pickle.
And the deadline's the deadline.
Yeah.
They're to say, and I guess I'll play
Right.
lawyer tonight.
Tonight.
The notice is something that has been provided. But I would say the town is within whatever compliance with this has been ongoing for years.
Sure.
And so I don't think it's a notice issue.
Right.
And from a
Okay.
staff standpoint, if it is effective today or it's effective on May 1st, we're going to apply whatever is in effect at that time.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity. I understand now. Thank you.
Yeah, and remember, this is not, if somebody is already building a project, they don't have to finish the project. They've already got a permit. They've already met the requirements they had to meet. I don't see how 90 days makes a difference. It might as well be 180 days or a year, and we've been working on this for years now. For years. Yes, Ms. Will.
But as we all know, it ain't over till second reading and the final votes. This could change it could be I know you're saying this is it, and maybe this was what will pass, but like it could be amended up to the moment that it passes, or not pass, right? Like we have these things that happen all the time. I think I agree with Mr. Rambo on the 90 days.
Well, this is final reading.
I know this is final reading. I'm saying, but it can be amended at final reading, right? Which is what we're doing right now, which we, failed on the cottage court and are doing right now.
So let me ask, if you support that as chair of planning and people come up in 90 days and say, wait, I didn't have time. I mean, we've been hearing for weeks from people who had work done with no permits, and it's our problem that we're supposed to fix it. So I don't see how we're solving a problem with that. I think we're creating another. Mr. Chapman.
Mayor, earlier on, you hit the nail on the head. We've been working on this zoning ordinance for a long time. And I don't even want to ask Ms. Reed how long she's been working on revising and updating the zoning ordinance. People who came to get permits knew we were working on this for a long time. I think at some point you got to pass the ordinance and move forward. Right now, I think we're talking about splitting hairs. And I really think we need to move forward and have an ordinance that is much more beneficial to the community. So I'm going to vote for it.
Right.
I'm not going to vote for the amendment.
We're going to need a roll call, and this is to make effective on May 1st, 2024. A yes vote is to move the implementation of the zoning to that. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Whitley?
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Brownstein?
Yes.
Mr. Brownstein votes yes. Mr. Chapman?
No.
Mr. Chapman votes no. Ms. Hyatt? No. Ms. Hyatt votes no. Mr. Icabano?
Yes.
Mr. Icabano votes yes. Mr. Rambo?
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mayor Haney?
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Santos. Mr. Santos?
Yes.
Mr. Santos votes yes. Mayor Haney?
No. So by 5-3, the motion passes. The amendment passes, excuse me. So, all right. So now we have amended it to include making it effective on May 1st. We did not keep cottage courts in there. Are there any other amendments? Yes, ma'am.
I think Mr. Icabano.
Well, you going first. Go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
Ladies first.
I was talking about my heartburn earlier over the pine trees, and I think protecting pine trees at 24 inches creates a perverted incentive to cut down pine trees before they get to 24 inches, right? Like, so if I had a pine tree on my lot that was getting close to that size, I would take that thing down before it got too big. The pine trees, I'm concerned about that. The tree protection zones doubling, I'm concerned about that rendering lots unbuildable, and what creating. We're changing something that's been this way for a really long time. I get that we want to protect trees, but if we're making lots unbuildable, Ms. Reed, what is the procedure for? So we suddenly make these lots unbuildable. Now they have to go to BOZA. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be the remedy. If so, if you double a tree protection zone and somebody wants to do an addition or a new structure or something like that, and they want to encroach in that tree protection zone, yeah, they would have to get a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay. I mean, I agree with the majority, like pretty much everything in the zoning code update that we worked on for so long, but I'm concerned about the pine trees. I'm concerned about this tree protection zone impacting people's ability to build on their properties. And I know we have remedies in place of like mitigation and that kind of thing. So I'm going to support this zoning. I'm just lodging my objections to the pine trees and the tree protection zones.
All right. Actually, though, we need motions. There's just no free discussion anymore. Yes.
Well, then I would like to make a motion, and I'll explain myself after then. I'd like to make a motion to pull out all of the tree requirements on this zoning and send it to our tree task force that we are forming. And I believe that tree task force should be made up of individuals that, from the individual that wants to lay down in front of the bulldozer, right? And to the other side of some, professionals that can give positive input on how this should be done. And I think that we're forming a tree task force, and I think that it would be a good thing for them to work on, because I think there is some things to work on with this tree ordinance. Now, if I don't get a second, then I won't discuss it. I guess.
Well, let me read it back.
So
remove all tree requirements and refer to the tree task force.
Yes,
that
sir.
adequately
Yes, sir.
stated? Okay.
Yes, sir. That's correct. Right. So we have a second.
Did I hear a second? Okay.
So the reasoning for mine is I agree with a lot of this of the tree section in here. I do have concerns. My concerns are, if we're protecting pine trees, I'm still confused on somebody cutting down 8 23-inch pine trees in their yard and not one 24-inch pine tree. It is one concern of mine. And I do have some concerns with person's property rights. And if you're a family and you want to add on to your house, what the cause and effect of this is, I'm still not sure about that, and the affordability that it provides for the town of Mount Pleasant. If I've got a 3-bedroom house and I end up being a family of 5 and I'd like to add on to my house, and I'm not able to do that, but I love living in the town of Mount Pleasant, how do I add on to my house to make it livable for my family? But so everything will go to Bozo. I mean, just everything goes to Bozo. Okay, I think this should go to our tree task force, or I don't know why else we're forming a tree task force.
So
I think it could still go to the tree task force. If there's something we haven't done well, they could make new recommendations to us. Anything we're passing today, we could change next month at another meeting. So for me, let's get busy protecting the trees. The longer we wait, the more trees we lose. Sure. That's part of the reason I have a problem with waiting 90 days. I'd like for this to start today. Everything. We've worked on this so long. We just need to do it. And we will form a tree task force. And if we've not included something we should, or we've overstepped, they'll let us know and we can correct it at that time.
Yeah, we've heard the phrase before, kicking the can. I say we pass it with the tree protections, and then the task force helps tweak it. That's what we have been thinking from the start. I haven't heard anybody say, why don't we move this forward, but let's don't do any new tree protections. This has been the premise.
Well, I'm not against tree protection. I thought it'd be a great thing for
I'm sorry. I thought the motion said remove all tree requirements and refer to the tree task force.
Yes, but my words were not to not protect trees, but I hear what you're saying. I thought that the tree task force could do a more educated.
Forgive me if I have transposed your motion, but I thought it was remove all tree requirements and refer to the tree task force. If that's wrong, then I stated the motion.
No, because the old tree, old tree zoning still stays in. I mean, it's not. Go ahead.
I guess I'm confused because the new tree requirements are the ones that we're discussing and people are having some problems with, right? Anyway, all right. but that's the motion. Any other discussion before we vote? And Madam Clerk, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. Brownstein.
No.
Mr. Brownstein votes no. Mr. Chapman.
No.
Mr. Chapman votes no. Ms. Hyatt. No. Ms. Hyatt votes no. Mr. Icafano.
Yes.
Mr. Icafano votes yes. Mr. Rambo.
No.
Mr. Rambo votes no. Mr. Santos.
Yes.
Mr. Santos votes yes. Ms. Whitley.
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mayor Haney.
No.
Mayor Haney votes no.
Motion fails by 5-3. All right. So we have an amended zoning code. If there are no other amendments, we will take the vote on the primary. And let me just check, Mr. Pagliarini, you're looking, we're square?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There'd be if there's no more amendments, there'll be a vote as amended.
Okay. So there's already a motion. We've already had discussion. So this will be the final vote as amended. And I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Hyatt.
Yes.
Ms. Hyatt votes yes. Mr. Icafano.
Yes.
Mr. Icafano votes yes. Mr. Rambo.
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mr. Santos.
Yes.
Mr. Santos votes yes. Ms. Whitley.
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Brownstein.
Yes.
Mr. Brownstein votes yes. Mayor Haney.
Yes.
Mayor Haney votes
So by 8-0, congratulations. Our zoning code passes after years and years of work.
Final reading ordinance.
About
number
as long as this
2404.
meeting tonight. So, okay. This moves us to item 9, action items, education committee. We might be able, to save time, if you don't mind, we can still have discussion, but the chair would like to move to refer this to the finance committee because we need numbers on staff training. We need numbers on costs. We need we don't know what the value of any of this is, and so the motion is to refer this to the finance committee. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. These are 3 recommendations that came out of the Education Committee. One thing that I've noticed in my role for the last year on the town council is how little awareness there is sometimes in the community about the different things that we're working on here. I think all 3 of these are common sense, low cost ways that we could use our existing staff to increase the transparency, increase our communication with the public. The 3 recommendations are to live stream all of our meetings, which my understanding was that was done during the COVID period with our existing staff. I think, potentially people could be cross-trained. It doesn't always have to be Eric LaFontaine in the back of the room. I think it's a way to meet people where they are and proactively provide information to the public. The second thing is to investigate using AI for help transcribing the minutes. And the third is to use our social media accounts to put out a post every time we have a public meeting in advance that contains the agenda items. I really don't see any of these costing significant money to the town. I think that if you were to walk down the street and ask people if they would like these things, if these things would help, they would give you a resounding yes. So I'm not in favor of sending to finance. I think we just need to make the decision, utilize our existing staff. I just don't see how this adds any cost to our town.
Point of order.
Yes.
Are we discussing A1, 2, and 3 all right now, or I thought the motion was just for A1?
No, the motion was all of it.
Oh, okay.
All of it. Back in my first term as mayor, Ms. Whitley's and Mr. Santos were here. We on a feeling got the idea, and we had a council member wanted us to move our council meetings up to Park West. So we did it. So we packed up everything. We packed up tables for a dais. We packed up everything you can think of, audio-visual equipment. security, and then Chief Carl Ritchie even had to take the police command post up there because we needed a room to go in to do executive session. So we went up there because we thought there was going to be a whole lot of new participation. We're going to be reaching people that didn't want to drive down to town hall, and we did it once and nobody new came. It was the same people. We did it the second time, same thing happened. We did a cost benefit analysis to our citizens and decided that it was not worth what it was costing our citizens for us to move it up there. So even though our feeling was we thought it was going to be a big success, we don't know. We don't have any numbers on this. How many people are watching right now? If you're watching on YouTube, I talked to somebody who said it's usually 5 or 6. I'm for live streaming the meetings too, but I was also told by staff we have one person trained to do that, and that's extra hours. A lot of those committee meetings are at night and all that kind of stuff. We're right in the middle of budget year. I'm not apologizing for wanting to know some numbers and some metrics before, so we can make an educated decision. Otherwise, we're doing it on a whim, and we don't even know what it's going to cost. And I think y'all know how I feel about open checkbook things, so that's why I made the motion. Mr. Rambo?
So I was thinking that the motion was just for A1 because I have other thoughts on 2 and 3. And just for the record, my wife texted. She said there's 14 people currently watching. She wanted, by the way.
Thank you.
She's a glutton for punishment.
This is for 1, 2, and 3.
Anyway, number one, I'm totally fine. And as a finance chair, receiving more information about the overall cost. I do in general support live streaming the meeting. I thought it was very helpful during the COVID time period. Even as a council member on the planning committee, for instance, it was really nice to be able to go back to the planning commission meeting and look at a controversial agenda item and how they voted instead of relying on a commission member and a staff member to kind of give me different perspectives on how the meeting went. It was nice to be able to go back and watch that and see that. And I have a lot of kids that play a lot of different sports, and so there's no way I'm going to be here at that time. And so I really am in favor of that. But I also am good getting some numbers to make sure it's not too cost prohibitive. Number 2, I'm not sure the session with transcribing minutes. I mean, if we're gonna move to have everything be videoed, I don't get the transcription. It took a lot of staff time. I know we're saying to use AI. Maybe it's being born in Charleston, but like Siri, when I talk to text, never gets it anywhere close to correct. So I don't know how it's still going to take a massive amount of staff time. So I don't understand that one. Number 3, I feel like we already do, and maybe we don't. And if we don't, I'm fine to approve that one right now. So I guess my ask would be, can we separate these motions into the different items?
I'm not amending the motion.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the motion is just to send these to finance, right?
Well,
that we're not voting on these right now. That we were going to send to finance.
Anybody can put it on a committee. But let me also, since you asked, let me read you part of our code 30.68's reference to standing committees. Matters to be referred to the several standing committees are such as appertain or relate to the subjects designated in the names of the committees whenever matters are brought before the council by petition or otherwise connected with or relating to such subjects exclusively. The matter shall be referred as a matter of course to the standing committees having charge of such subjects. So in my meeting with legal yesterday, everything that has to do with meetings, processes, all of that stuff falls under the Police, Judicial, and Legal Committee. We weren't even told or asked or included in any of this. And so we can't have a committee just saying, well, we have a nebulous name, so we can say, well, we're educating people. Well, they could do that with financial things. They could do that with planning things. And this is a huge overreach by the Education Committee. We don't, when have we voted on telling staff what they're going to post on social media? I mean, this doesn't say what social media. I mean, is it every social media? Are we going to tell them which ones they should be on if they're not? So we're getting into some weird territory here. Nobody has a problem with live streaming committee and commission meetings. The question is, who's going to train the staff? What budget is it going to come out of? And how many people are we going to do? And what if the people who are trained can't be there for a meeting? Then we can't live stream it. Then what? So, this has not been vetted. Legal wasn't even asked about our ordinance. We have an ordinance on minutes, right, that exists. Was legal asked anything about minutes?
No, sir.
Okay.
What we do have, there is a state law regarding minutes, and the town vote, I
Right.
believe, was 2019 when council
Right.
voted it as far as minutes are concerned.
Right. And it came from two people in a meeting. The third person wasn't there, and now y'all want everybody to vote on stuff that we don't even know. As a matter of fact, we cannot have transcribed minutes. Yes, the clerk can use it to come up with what the minutes are, but Robert's Rules, which is by ordinance used in this town, says what the minutes are supposed to be, and it is not a transcription. Can you use AI to get there? Yes, but you cannot just say, here's what came with AI and it's a verbatim transcription. That does not comply with Robert's Rules of Order. And if you'd brought this to police, judicial, and legal, we would have been glad to have this conversation. But gosh, referring something to a couple of committees to get more information on something is going to be a controversy. Do you want the floor?
I haven't had my first yet. You've had two. So, okay, taking this one at a time. I think that we can first look into, and maybe the education committee came out with all meetings, but I do know that staff is here for committee day. Full staff. I don't think it costs literally another penny for full staff to just do committee day. They're here. They sit exactly right there. The only difference is they just don't live stream it. So I think that could be pulled out and possibly voted on tonight. I don't want to put staff on the spot, but if we'd like to, we can. I literally don't think it is full staff here that does the YouTube
May
stream.
I ask you a question?
Yes.
Full staff is here
Committee day.
on committee day.
Yes.
Okay.
We're
So
talking about council committee day, but this is not just about council. This is about boards and commissions too.
That's why I'm breaking it apart. I understand your concern. That's why I'm breaking it apart. So I think that would be a good thing that maybe if somebody amends that later, that committee can go right to it. I think it's great playback, and especially committee days. Exactly that's during the day. What a great opportunity while you're at work to be able to look into a committee that you're not able to make it to. On point 2, that says approval to investigate the utilization of artificial intelligence for transcribing minutes. This is happening in municipalities all over. I don't know that is. I don't know where Eric is on how much it costs the staff to look into AI, or if he could do that on his own. But I don't think this is actually buying an AI. This is something investigating. That's not committing to actually buying it. And then the third part is approval to add meeting notices and agenda items to town social media accounts. How many do we have on staff that work on social media and marketing and things of that sort?
Well, sir, we have 4 individuals in communications. My guess is you have 1 or 2 who are more directly tied to social media.
Do you feel that adding notices in social media, adding notices to our social media accounts would cost any money, or is that part of day-to-day operations?
Well, I wouldn't talk about the money part of it.
Right.
I know we already put council agendas on social media to begin with. Certainly putting committee agendas wouldn't be any trouble. Starting to add more and more agendas start to create the potential for another problem, and that is I'm starting to get into a territory that's a little bit not familiar to me, but the more posts start to drive down visibility and priority, and then if the more that we post, if you want to go all the way as far as special committees and special commissions, then it may end up in the long term having the opposite effect of what you're looking for. It pushes us further down the visibility. So, we do council now. If you wanted to go to committees, council committees, that wouldn't be any trouble.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I don't know if it's a me idea problem or a Daniel Brownstein idea problem, but this is giving transparency to the public. This is not spending $100,000 like was spent on the project at Patriots Point. That was $100,000 did not go to committee. So maybe section 30.68 I'll have to look into and see if that covers that $100,000 that was spent on outside advice and drawings. So all we're asking for here is to give the public accurate minutes, live streaming of meetings, and a little bit more notice on what they're actually on every day, which is social media. I mean, people do not pay attention. I wish they did to the yellow signs, but everybody's on social media every day. So I think first step, let's live stream committees. Artificial intelligence is that's investigating it. That's not buying it. And yeah, so the fact that we kind of went 1, 2, 3 on all three of them right off the rip, I would agree with Mr. Rambo on that. These should have been taken individually. So for that, I'll be a no vote.
So, Mr. Iacofano, since I know you're making hay about Patriots Point,
making hay
and all
about
those
spending
things.
money.
Everything that was done with that, as we received in a memo from the town administrator, was done in compliance with the town's procurement, and you're continuing to spread falsehoods, and I think you need to stop. It is unbecoming an elected official. And I tell you what, I will vote for all this when we pass an anti-SLAPP, when we pass a resolution supporting anti-SLAPP regulation, because we talk about public engagement. I'm not the one suing my own constituents for being
Is there
involved.
a point of order on this? Are we off subject on this? I don't know Robert's rules on this.
I just stated when I
order.
will vote.
Can I get a
for
point of
certain
order on
things.
that?
Council's
It's a little
obligated
off
to stay
subject.
on the matter of the agenda.
Right. Stay on the matter of the
Sometimes
agenda.
discussion is tangentially related. I mean, I cannot make a decision or a ruling on that. That is up to council.
Yeah. Can you show me where Patriots Point is in item 10A, please?
I was just asking if it's part of 30.68.
Okay. So, since number 1 said approval to proceed with live streaming meetings, and I say this in relation to my motion, since now we're only talking about council committees.
Well, I think that'd have to be amended. So I think you have to go to your.
I will withdraw my motion, because if all you're talking about is council committees, that's not a problem. The problem is, and I met with staff on this, and I don't know if y'all asked staff at your committee meeting or not, is there video capability in the committee room where most of our boards and commissions meet? And the answer was no, it does not exist there now. So there will be some cost in that, but this is only about council committees. That's an easy thing to do because we meet in here. The other boards and commissions do not all of them, however. Now, if I'm hearing that approval to investigate utilization of artificial is not something that we have to vote on, that staff has to do that's fine. Approval to add meeting notices based on the person who by law directs staff. I think I heard that we might get the opposite effect. So, I will withdraw my motion, Mr. Chapman, if you'll withdraw your second.
I'll withdraw it.
Okay, thank you very much. Because I think we heard staff say that putting everything on there for every commission and all that would actually have the opposite effect. So if we're just talking about live streaming council meetings, let's go for it. I mean, that's easy. That's done in this room right here.
I'll make a motion that we proceed with live streaming council committee meetings.
Second.
All right.
I also, I do think we need to eventually live stream our boards and commissions. I think it would be extremely helpful to us as council members, as well as providing transparency to the public. So we'll take that motion, I guess, up afterwards.
Yep.
I don't know if that needs to be a motion, Mr. Demora. So I will put that item on the finance committee meeting for just a presentation about a breakdown of costs. Yeah, I don't know if that really needs to be a motion, but that's what we'll do.
Well, that would be great. We appreciate that, Jake.
Thank you. So we have a motion to live stream council meetings.
Yep.
Yes.
And just for the record, quite the engagement boost. There's now 20 people watching on YouTube, so I wanted to correct my
getting
previous
hot.
statement. Y'all,
Well, and I
Yeah.
think also people
Getting
go
hot in
in
here.
after the fact and watch it when it's not live as well. So I know if you look at the views, there's several hundred views for most
That's
of those
correct.
council meetings.
Okay. So the motion is to proceed with live streaming council committee meetings. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
No.
Were you a no?
I'm a no.
Okay. So there's one no. Thank you.
I want to know the difference.
The what?
We just heard from Mr. Rambo, only 14 people were watching. Why would more than 14 watch live stream?
Because those 14 people, even if it's one
Sorry,
person,
it's
they're
addressed to Mr.
Sorry.
Rambo.
sorry.
I wouldn't know how to answer that, but I would say, as someone who does sometimes go back and watch parts of a meeting, especially if something is contentious, I know when we do deal with more contentious items, we do have a lot more viewers. I have to remember back to the COVID days, we had thousands of viewers,
But we're not there.
but sometimes we could be. But why not? That would be my question for you. Why not?
Okay.
May I?
Yes.
Because we don't know what the situation of those 14 viewers are. We don't know if that person can make it here. Every one person, I don't care if one person is watching that YouTube, that one person matters. And that one person could possibly be a citizen, and they could be stuck at home. They might not have transportation. So we're not, although I appreciate the 14 or so people that are sitting here now, those 14 people at home matter just as much. One person matters just as much.
Okay, so we addressed item 1. We voted on it. Item 2, we've addressed. Item 3, I believe we also addressed.
No, I don't believe we've addressed items 2 or 3. I'll make a motion that we investigate the utilization of AI for transcribing minutes.
Second? Oh. You can have it.
I second.
All right. We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
I'd like to make a motion that we give the town administrator approval to add meeting notices and agenda items to town social media accounts.
Second. Second.
So that is, your motion is to give him approval, but we are not requiring, because if they see that some of the numbers look bad and have an opposite effect, they can choose not to.
Actually, I'll rephrase it to require the town administrator to add meeting notices and agenda items to town social media accounts. And if it does hurt our visibility, I expect him to come back and provide us a report.
Okay, so the
Second.
okay, so
Second.
it is now require, not to add, require the town administrator to add meeting notices to agenda items, of agenda items. May I ask for clarification? What agendas?
All public meeting agendas, boards, commissions, council.
All public meeting agendas, okay. Would that include youth council?
Sure.
Okay, so all public
meetings.
Okay. Is your second good on that amendment? Who
Yes,
was
sir.
the second? Okay. You know, I don't think that we need to be voting on what is going to be posted on social media when all the proper notices are already made. This could be our website. Mr. Paglioni, did we ever vote to require that any of our notices be put on the website? Did that require a vote of council at any point?
No, sir. Didn't require a vote. I mean, legal position on that is state law provides us notice requirements. We've always said consistently through the years that we want to make sure that we're not providing hurdles that would violate on our own. So that would be the reasoning why we did not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the motion is to require. Oh, yes, ma'am. Ms. Hyatt.
It was seconded, right?
Yeah, it was seconded by Mr. Icafani.
I'm wondering if there's an easy way to do this, like with a link to our town page, because the agendas are posted on our town page, right? So would it be easier just to have a link when you talk about posting all this, can push other important items down? Can we just post a link?
If you want to make a motion to amend that so that we're now describing social media posts, I mean, how far are we going to go with this?
I think the difference is putting it on the website requires a person to have either the interest or the gumption to search our website for the meeting, check and see what's on it. This is us being proactive and pushing out to the public exactly what is being contemplated. So I think that's the fundamental difference. I think if you just put a link, people aren't going to have an idea of what's on the agenda without taking that further step. And so I think we really need to be proactive in our communication with the public and let them know in clear terms what's being contemplated.
Yeah, and if it helps, maybe you could put a time limit on it. Maybe try it for 6 months. Just put a time limit on it.
That's not in the motion.
Okay.
All right, so if we're at the end of discussion, all in favor of requiring the town administrator to post the agendas of all public meetings on town social media, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
No. Who are the no's? How many no's?
I'm a no.
Okay, so there's 2 no's. Motion carries.
And I have a question
Yes.
about, what about Moultrie News? That's pretty important to me. What about the newspaper? How much is that going to cost per line? That's why it initially should have gone to finance.
So, Mr. Chapman, this was exclusively social media, not changing any of our other legal notifications.
I'm not going to get in an argument with you, except to say that Moultrie News is very important.
I agree.
And it costs. So is what we post every week on the Post and Courier.
Agree.
So my point is, at some point, we have to let the town administrator do his job. We are not supposed to be directing him to such finite material.
The item has already been voted on.
Yes,
Point of order.
I agree.
So we're on to the next agenda item.
We're on item B, Finance Committee recommendation to accept the Town of Mount Pleasant fiscal year 2024 audit report, which everyone was given. Yes, ma'am, and welcome.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
If you'll walk us through this, please.
Sure. So our fiscal year 24 internal auditors, Malden and Jenkins, have presented the town with an unmodified or clean opinion, which may not sound very
Sure.
grand.
I hate to steal your thunder, but as a motion from the Finance Committee, Mr. David Irwin of Malden gives an overview of the town's fiscal year 2024 independent external financial audit. The Finance Committee discussed the presentation with Mr. Irwin and staff and recommended acceptance of the report. As such, I move the council accept the audit for the fiscal year in June 30, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Section 10, Council New Business, first reading. Ordinance to amend the section entitled Public Right-of-Way Planting or Replacement. I'll give you a brief synopsis of this. Mr. Rambo and I being the Waterworks Commissioners. The wording in that goes towards more like industrial or suburban type hydro seeding and everything. And with the movement for pollinator-friendly vegetation, they are asking that we sort of restate that, amend that, so that they can do pollinator-friendly vegetation, which is very popular with our citizens in the town of Mount Pleasant. And Mr. Pagliarini, if I got any of it wrong, let me know.
No, sir, that is the correct
All right.
language.
So, would you make the motion since you're from?
Oh, yes. Move to approve.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
First reading ordinance number 25006.
Item 2 is an ordinance to amend the budget for the town of Mount Pleasant for the fiscal year commencing July 1 and ending June 30th.
I can walk you through this very quickly. This is our proposed mid-year budget amendment. The 3.45 million, which is the first line item, is the calculated amount of additional unassigned fiscal year 24 ending fund balance that, per our fund balance policy, gets transferred over to the capital fund. The next three items are additional uses of fund balance that we are requesting for fiscal year 25. The first is $900,000 for the Park West pool roof. Originally, this was to be a separate capital project, but it makes sense to do it in conjunction with the current work that's being done at Park West, so we don't have to disrupt operations in the future there again. The second item is for additional Hurricane Debbie related salary expenses, additional overtime, and paid time off expenses that total $366,628. And the third item is for additional funding for the North End Farmers Market. Now, the $40,000 amount wasn't an estimate that we were using at the time the agenda was published. Since then, we've gotten some firmer estimates, so if approved, this number would get amended down to $25,000 at second reading. There are two additional items not on the list that would be additional uses of fund balance as well. The first is additional funds related to a special election to replace Chief Ritchie. We're still waiting to hear back from the county on that, so we do not have firm numbers, but that would need to be an amendment at second reading. And then, excuse me, there's a potential recommendation from the Economic Development Committee for possible HEC funding totaling $100,000. So that would need to be added as an amendment at second reading if approved as well. And then the final two line items is the federal grant, the 1.3 million COSIP grant that was approved at Town Council in December, and then the additional debt fund revenue and go bond expense that are approved with the one debt mill increase.
I'd like, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the amendments, the mid-year budget amendments. Is there any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. Are we, the two additional items that you mentioned, which were the Harbor Entrepreneur Center, $100,000, and what was the other one?
The other one is additional funds for
The
special election.
Okay. Those ones we can't discuss tonight because they're not on the table because they're not included yet. Is that
Remember,
correct?
you can discuss them. It's just the ordinance cannot be amended at this point, but you can discuss them.
Okay. I guess prior to second reading, I would really appreciate some more information on the Harbor Entrepreneur Center's statistics as far as how many companies have been incubated, their success level, you know, what's kind of come out through there. Do we see kind of our return on investment for that? That's what I would just like to see before we do that.
And I see Grady here. They published those figures. Was it today on your social media? And the numbers are very impressive. So I think you'll be very happy with that. Yes, sir, Mr. Rambo.
Along those lines, I actually would like Ms. Hyatt, if you would put that back on the Economic Development Committee agenda for next month as well. So I feel like we kind of skirted over it a little bit, but it needs some more digging into, particularly the need for a mid-year. I don't know why the time frame is so rushed and it can't be part of the regular budget process. And I think, so anyway, I just want to discuss those ins and outs.
All right, the motion is to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
First reading ordinance number 25007.
Number 3, first reading of ordinance to amend section 30.46 entitled Procedure for Enactment of Town Ordinances of Mount Pleasant Code of Ordinances. That's legalese. Mr. Pagliarini, would you tell us what this is about?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This matter was discussed at the last council meeting, was brought to PJL, essentially related to, as it states, procedure for enacting town ordinances. There was no recommendation at PGL, and was requested by Mr. Brownstein to be placed on tonight's agenda in conformity with our rules and procedures. The current rule provides, as up on the screen, and that is something that we just discussed. Our system is set up so that first reading is for notice only. Obviously, everything can be discussed. Consideration of future amendments can be discussed, but the idea is to place it for notice to the public and to council. And of course, that second reading, that is when ordinances may be amended. You see in front of you the state law requirement. It essentially says that you have to have at least 2 readings and 6 days between each reading. Those are the minimum standards. And we did review what other municipalities do just for your consideration, and you will see that it is across the board. Charleston County or city requires 3 readings, City of Columbia 2 readings, and there's some modifications that can be made. City of Greenville does 2 readings, amendments permitted at either first or second readings. North Charleston also limited modifications. And again, City of Myrtle Beach. So there are many ways to do this. The request.
May I ask a real quick question?
Yes, sir.
Does this say that Charleston, Columbia, and North Charleston all, I see first reading is by title only?
Right.
Unless full reading. So are we saying that those 3 do not amend at first reading? I'm not clear on that.
Generally not. Yes, sir. There can be a full reading requested by a member of council, and all that relates to is by title only. So you're correct that those they do it similar to us.
So Charleston, Columbia, and North Charleston do it that way. Greenville, you can amend on first reading. And what did you say about Myrtle Beach?
Myrtle Beach is title only unless full reading. And again, that is essentially similar to ours.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this ordinance. And then, assuming I get a second, I'll give you my rationale.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. You have the floor.
Thank you, sir. So this agenda item, this ordinance, would allow us to make amendments at either first or second reading. My understanding, as Mr. Pagliarini said, different places do it different ways. Certainly, something that is done in other places throughout the state. The rationale behind it is, with our current system, a member of the public has no idea on what the final vote is going to be on. A couple of examples just tonight. People here to see the zoning code rewrite weren't sure when it was going to take effect, whether it would protect pine trees, what about the tree protection zones, cottage courts. My thought behind this is there are certain issues that can be ironed out early on in the process to give the public notice of what will likely be voted on at second reading. In those cases, we should make those amendments early and give the public a time to research and absorb the information. It doesn't preclude us from making amendments at second reading. So as we're going through and discussing the issue, we can certainly continue to make them at second reading, but it does give us the flexibility to address matters earlier on in the process and give the public some comfort about what will be voted on or likely voted on at the second and final reading.
Ms. Hyatt, you're busting at the seams. You have the floor.
I'm not sure what we're trying to fix, but to me, this just sounds confusing that we can be changing things up both times. That doesn't help the public really know what we're going to be voting on if we can we can change it at either reading. But to me, really, the first reading is what comes to council as a whole for the first time. Sometimes, if we weren't at a particular committee meeting that it came from, it's really the first time we're hearing it. It's the first time that we are hearing it, and the first time the public is hearing it formally as a whole. So to me, it's great for all of us to hear it and to think about it for a month until the second reading. That's the time for the public to act, and we can hear their ideas. And then the second reading is the time to make changes. When we see it for the first time, these are, committee recommendations. So some of us, it's the first time we're seeing it. Why would we even know to make any changes? So I feel like it's the way we're doing it is the way it should be. What's being proposed is presented. We have a month to talk about it, hear from the public, and then the second reading is the time to act on what we're hearing from the public. And I'm comfortable with the way we're doing it.
I concur. Yes, sir.
Could you go back to the other slide, please? I think the good news is that the committees will now be live streamed, and we could go back and look at them on YouTube. So could be very educated for the first reading now. I do notice that with the city of Charleston, they go first reading, title only, then they go second reading for the amendments, and then it goes to a third reading for a vote. Is that correct? I mean, the public has zero response time when we make amendments on the second reading, and then we vote. There's zero response time on that. They can't state whether they liked something or didn't like something. And I understand we're voted to make the decision, but I believe that if you pay attention to committees, either show up at committee day, it allows us the chance to make those amendments on first reading, truly gives 30 days for the public to respond, and maybe second reading is actually a little quicker than making all the amendments. But it gives two chances for amendments, which I don't think is the worst thing to do. And I would agree with Mr. Brownstein on what he stated as well. Thank you.
May I ask Ms. Pagliarini, how long has the town done it this way, approximately?
Appears that this was codified in 1981, so 40 years.
40 something years.
Yes, sir.
How was it before?
That is,
we don't even know.
Gary?
Gary, you know?
If it ain't broke. That was good. Yes. Ms. Whitley has the floor.
So I guess my only thought of why this could potentially be a good thing is that sometimes at our meetings we are cautioning the public. We're saying, it's first reading, don't worry, this isn't what the final thing's going to look like. We're going to change this, 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 and this at second reading. Why not change it at first reading? And then we know what's going into second reading. So I think, and I agree with Mr. Icofano in the sense that if we do make a change at second, sometimes a wild thought can come in at second reading and come through, and then there's no chance for public input or or anything, and that just passes as it is, and we deal with the consequences of that. So, I mean, on the one hand, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But is it broke if we're having to caution the public often at first reading of, don't worry, this isn't the final form, we're going to change this, we're going to amend this, we're going to take a deeper look at this. This just takes it a step earlier, and might force us to be more prepared for first reading. I don't know. Do more reading before first reading. I don't know. So I'm fine with passing first reading because it can always change at second reading. Sorry, I'm getting punchy. It's 9:15. It's my bedtime. Okay, thank you.
I agree.
So this would require a second reading. It wouldn't take effect until after second reading, right?
Correct.
Oh, the irony.
And the proposed language is on the screen. It's just a simple stating that amendments are permitted at each reading.
I want to remind everybody, Greenville is only 2/3 the size of Mount Pleasant. They're the only ones of all the ones we saw who amend on first reading. And I think, which league do you want to play in? Charleston, Columbia, North Charleston, or with a city that's 2/3 our size. I don't see that it's broken. I've been here the second longest of anybody. And the only thing, I don't know what problem you're trying to solve, but I know what problem you're going to cause. Is it's going to be, you're going to have amendments after first reading, and then the public's not going to know because there are no minutes published between then and the next meeting. So you're not solving a problem. You still have an ordinance that the public doesn't know what it says because we will have amended it at first reading. And how are they going to know to go look for those changes? Yes, sir. Mr. Raymond.
That's actually a good point, but wouldn't the agenda for the next meeting that included second reading, when you link to the ordinance in the agenda, would include the ordinance as amended?
It would.
It would.
Yeah, so then you actually have it. See, to me, that's way more clear. I hate amending on second reading.
When is that published?
Huh?
But when is that published? How far ahead of the second?
Typically
Usually
Friday.
we put it out on Friday,
Friday.
to meet
They get it
requirements.
over the weekend before we meet Tuesday night and vote on it.
Well, now they'll be notified by social media as well.
if they want to read through all that.
And if AI is in
Ms.
effect,
Santos, did you have anything to say since you've served the longest?
You know, I'm listening to all this, trying to take it in. You know, I think it's been working well the way it is, but I don't mind trying something new. If you think it's going to be better than what we've been doing, then I'm all for trying it.
Yeah.
All right. So, yes, sir, Mr. Chapman.
The whole purpose of throwing something out at first reading is to give us and the public an opportunity to see what is being considered. In terms of the city of Charleston, if you read it, it says they don't do any amendments at third reading. They do first reading. There's no amendments at first reading. The amendments are made at second reading. The only way you can make an amendment, and I can tell you, having been to meetings there for 26 years, I don't remember one time, unless it was completely pulled out and a separate meeting was held, that there were amendments made with a unanimous consent of council on third reading. In terms of what we're thinking about doing, is letting the public know there's something coming up. There's something that the town is going to try to do. Those people then have a full month to harass you, Mr. Icofano, to harass you, Mr. Brownstein, to harass me about what in the world are you thinking about doing. So they've got plenty of time, not only for them to let us know what their thoughts are, but for them to come here and watch us, or watch us on television, or watch us on live streaming, and see, are you going to listen to what I said or not? The whole purpose of the first reading, which I will say is what we tried to do with Patriots Point, is to let the public know what we were thinking about. And once they hear that, then they have an opportunity to let us know what they would like to have changed. That's why I like what we're doing here. And we're basically doing the same thing the city of Charleston, North Charleston, and others are. So I don't think we need to do amendments, because that's going to confuse the public more than anything.
All right. I think from the comments we know how this is going to go. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no?
No.
Oh, okay. So there's 4 no's and 4 yes, so the motion fails.
Here are the no's.
The no's are Santos, Haney, Hyatt, and Chapman.
Thank you.
Okay, next is action to accept partial settlement related to the city of Charleston and all. This is Airbnb. We all read the memo. We don't really need executive session on this. What do you, okay.
Motion to accept.
Second.
To accept the partial settlement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me add something that I would like everybody to think about. Airbnb is funding the campaign in Columbia to every year they are working with legislators to limit our ability to regulate short-term rentals. And the legislature just went into session today. And here we're going to get $494,000 net out of this. There are people around the state saying, do not do this, because what they would like to do is go in and say, hey, we just settled up with all the cities. The slate is clean. And now let's talk about these regulations. So I would ask everybody, doesn't mean we won't settle at some point, but if we settle right here on the first day that the state legislature has gotten in there, we are flirting with disaster, because I guarantee you, if we couldn't limit short-term rentals, that $494,000 is not going to make up for what it's going to do to this town. So I have to be a no on that settlement. We can always settle in June when the legislature adjourns. We don't know that they might withdraw the offer, but that's nowhere near the damage that would happen to this town if the legislature takes away our ability to regulate them.
Mr. Haney.
Yes.
I have a question for Mr. Pagliarini. I believe that you sent a memo recommending that we do accept this as a fair settlement. Is that correct?
Sir, there is a reason that there is a possible executive session attached to this. There are two questions here that I'll state in public. One is a political question that Mayor Haney has raised. The other is legal. I'm not authorized to make any legal advice without the full consent of counsel in public. So that is my response.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we need an executive session on this?
Well, let's ask this. What's the harm in waiting to accept this?
Sir, there are 15, the harm, since you're asking, the potential harm is, as you stated earlier, there are 15 plaintiffs in this case, numerous municipalities, as everybody well knows. And what I will say, which I think is okay to say in public, is that all have to agree or not agree. And as you mentioned already, the potential is that there will be no resolution there at any time in the future. We cannot predict that.
Okay, thank you.
So motion to go to executive session then? I mean, did we?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It seems like there's a different thought about it. I'll make a motion to go into executive session to discuss legal advice relating to City of Charleston et al. Versus Airbnb Incorporated.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? If we do, are we going into the courtroom here?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No.
All opposed.
Let everybody go home, man.
Yeah, I agree. Let me say this: council may take action on any item, including any subsection of any section listed on an executive session agenda or discussed in an executive session during a properly noticed meeting, which this is. All right, we in executive session.
You're falling asleep over there. I mean, God, we just put them through hell.
Yeah, it's kind of totally caught me off guard.
I would say one more.
It feels good to move for a second. It's on the phrase of their LinkedIn page. Yeah. All the companies that you can manage.
Chief, how many people did you lose?
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, good night. See you. Yeah, a long time. He retired, but he's a special investigator with Berkeley County Social Service now. Yes, sir.
Tell him I said hello.
Not me. I forget. My wife knows the short term. Use it for political voting.
Chief, I met somebody last night that knows you. I can't remember his name. He lives in the upstate, I think, in Asheville. He heard you had been clapping football. So I'll have to remember it later. It's funny, we were up in South Carolina War House. He mentioned actually, we were talking. Benji was up there. Was up there with me too. So it was funny, but yeah, you or below you. You might have been a child.
I got all the money and time.
An upperclassman, possibly.
My lawsuit doesn't have anything to do with defamation or slander. My lawsuit is malicious prosecution or abuse of process. What I need to do? I can give you some ammunition if you like. As far as
Testing.
standard, you got carpal tunnel.
Sure wish that we had AI for a meeting tonight.
Well, it's we everything that's like, well, the minutes don't come out fast enough. Well, they'd come out faster if they were AI. It'd be 1 day review. Like, I mean,
The minutes
how are you? Oh, I'm golden.
The minutes are posted online before they're approved.
Right. Oh, they are.
They have the draft watermark on them.
Oh, they
So
do.
after
Yeah.
you approve them, then I go back in and I take the
Cool.
Well, I try to
What
get
a
them out
night.
as quick
That was
as
a
I
fun
can.
night. Jesus. Back to old times.
No, I don't like it.
I don't love it either. I don't enjoy arguing or fighting, believe me. But
Just to give you some perspective, we have in the neighborhood 25 public meetings a month.
that was good open discussion. It just went to committees then. That's all. It's just discussion.
Not necessarily that too, but for social media posting, when you start posting that much, you get shot to the bottom and people don't see you.
Good timeline. Yeah. Well, I need to fail and try it out. I can fail.
Big stuff happened in there,
Was
huh?
that?
You missed it. You missed it.
You would have killed me in that.
So much fun more.
No.
Don't forget, there is one more.
There's
item.
still one more
What's
item.
After this.
I know, me and mine too.
There is one more item. I'm with you, Jake, man. Okay, we have reconvened. No votes were cast.
Missing Laura.
No action was taken. We do have a quorum. Here she comes. There was already a motion on the floor to accept the partial settlement. So, is there any further discussion after the information we received? All right. A yes vote is to receive the partial settlement. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. I'm a no. And so the motion carries.
Are you going?
Item B is old business final reading, an ordinance to enact section 3230 of Mount Pleasant Code of Ordinances to establish guidelines for the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion to approve. We have a second.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to confirm, this is the one that's going to allow for-profits to get our ATAX money? Is that correct?
Yes, if they meet state requirements. It's silent on nonprofit versus for-profit, but that it would allow them to apply.
I think I voted in favor of this on first reading, but I'm going to vote against it now. I like that our ATAX dollars go to support nonprofits. If someone wants ATAX dollars, they could become a nonprofit. It's pretty easy to file the paperwork. I just hesitate to think of the floodgates that it would open and the confusion and the committee of, and then the detriment to our existing nonprofits who rely on these ATAX dollars to put on good events for our community and those kinds of things. I don't think for-profit should be able to access these dollars.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As far as I understand that there's a need to codify or a desire to codify our ATAC committee and the guidelines within our local ordinances. So I think there is some merit to the underlying ordinance that's being discussed. I'd like to propose an amendment to require that applicants for ATAC funding be a nonprofit.
Second. We have a motion. We have a second. Let me make sure I got it. Amend that applicants
must be a nonprofit.
Must be at the time of
the time of application.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who was the second on that?
Mr. Santos.
Isn't that what the
Mr.
ordinance
Mayor.
says?
No, the ordinance is silent on it, and so I think there is a need to codify it, but I think we should codify it with the requirement that they be a nonprofit.
And let's ask legal, are we?
That's
Are we flirting with being are we superseded by state law on this?
I mean, we're always superseded by state
No,
law.
I know, but I mean expressly on
No,
this. Is
I don't
what I meant.
believe so, sir.
That was a very poorly worded, tired brain question. Is there state law that already supersedes this on
I
this
don't
thing?
believe so, sir.
Okay, that's like asking, can we be sued on this? Yeah,
So-
the answer is always yes. Yes, sir, Mr. Rambo.
I hear the concerns. Is there a way to split the difference and just say that a for-profit can apply, but that in our procedures that the committee, the ATAC committee follows, that priority be given to nonprofits, and that it's only if there's money left over, and it's kind of like can even be voted on separately or whatever. So anyway, that's
There
just
is
my question.
compromise language that could be drafted. I'd need to sit down and work through that as to how to create that exemption.
At the moment, we have this proposed amendment. Yeah. Hang on, you still has. Are you still?
When
I guess I'll just see if this passes first.
Mr. Ickfine?
Could you explain a little bit more what the state? Did you bring the state guidelines by chance?
So the state basically the accommodations taxes can be used for a list of things that are tourism related. So it's a heads and beds type situation. So theoretically, if a for-profit like the golf tournament that we've had could come and demonstrate, hey, we have these many room nights that we sell based on this tournament. These are the hotels and all that sort of stuff. Then they would meet state requirements to get the ATAX dollars to in turn use it for advertising to bring people in. So the current bylaws do state nonprofit, which has kind of been the preference for the ATAC so far.
This came up because of the golf tournament, I guess. You know, and I guess, Mr. Chairman and Council, I'd be happy to, being the conduit between ATAC and y'all, I'd be happy to sit down with Mr. Pagliarini and go over this. And I understand Mr. Chapman as well. With this golf tournament is important, but we do want to make sure we don't go down a slippery slope. So I don't know how that could be handled, or if I'm even allowed to do that and sit with you and review with Matt and Mr. Brady. Sorry, Mr. Pagliarini.
Yes, sir. I mean, there are motions on the floor.
Or if we want to send
So
it back after that motion, I'd be happy to, and make sure that we kind of secure that and then bring it back to council if we have time. But the motion's first, obviously.
Right. Ms. Whitley?
I think the point I would like to make is that money is fungible. If I am a for-profit making a profit of $100,000 on my golf tournament, and my budget for marketing is $20,000, and I can get $20,000 from the town, now my profit is $120,000. Money is fungible, and I think nonprofits exist for a benefit for certain reasons, and I think for-profits exist to put money in the pockets of the people who do them. So I don't think we should put taxpayers' dollars to boost the fungible money of someone's advertising dollars who is a for-profit ostensibly making a profit on whatever it is that they're doing. So I will support Mr. Brownstein's motion.
Okay. All right, so we have Mr. Chapman.
ATAX funds were specifically voted for in the state legislature to bring tourism and heads in beds into a community. That was the whole purpose for creating ATAX funds. Hopefully, some of our nonprofits can do that. Some of them can't, but we go ahead and give them funds to try to bring them up so that they will. We have an institution here that has brought thousands of people over time into Mount Pleasant for a specific purpose. And while they're here, by the way, they're eating in our restaurants. They're staying in our hotels and motels, which is the whole purpose of why the ATAX funds exist. The state committee on ATAX recognized this and made changes with their attorneys that allowed entities that put heads in beds. And so I would hope that we can still do that to help our hotels, to help our restaurants, and to help bring events that create heads in beds to Mount Pleasant and comply with what the state entity that oversees this is doing.
All right. Any other discussion on the amendment that applicants must be nonprofit at the time of application? All right. All in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
Ayes or noes?
Noes.
No's. Yes, she was asking for no's.
What were you?
Noes.
You're a no?
Gary's
Four.
we got 4.
4-4. So the amendment.
the other one, Mayor?
I was
Gary, me, Jake,
Sorry.
Howard.
So it fails.
So the motion fails. Did I get the count right, everybody? It's late, right?
4-4.
Okay, motion fails. Okay, so we did have a motion to approve the ordinance itself, right? That's what I have in my notes. We had a motion and a second. All right, so we're back to the primary motion. Any further discussion? The motion is to approve. Yes, sir.
I guess I would like to make, and I don't know if this is appropriate to do, or if it has to, the language has to be sorted out right now. But I mean, my thought is to amend it to where the language codifies that priority is given to nonprofits, not that for-profits can't apply.
Yes, sir.
Or do you feel like that would need a deferral?
Well, if the basic request is that priority, that priority be granted, and it's that simple, then that's language that we can incorporate now. If you want to get more,
I can leave it as simple as that. So I'll make a motion to amend that priority be given to nonprofits.
Second.
I'll second it, but I want to ask a question. In that, can you state with your priorities that both profit and nonprofit have to meet the necessary requirements that are in state law?
Yes, sir. That is my intention, that everyone would have to meet the requirements. It's simply that in some years we don't even give out all the ATAC money because we don't have enough applications that meet the requirements. So in those years, it gets opened up.
Let me ask the attorney. I don't think we have to vote that somebody meets the requirements. The
Yeah.
requirements are there whether we vote that or not.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I could answer that as well. I mean, they don't. They have Mr. Chapman, since you've been on, they've created a formula, a different formula now that goes over all those requirements and they get scored. So literally, people have been told, no, like nonprofits have come in with no heads and beds and added no culture to the town of Mount Pleasant, and they were given no's. So there is and I think Mr. Brady does a good job as well. We can ensure that that's in the formula as well. If they don't put heads and beds, and even if they're a nonprofit and they don't add culture, they don't get money. So that's already in the formula, I guess, is what I'm stating. But and I would agree with Mr. Rambo. I think Mr. Rambo's motion alone, and obviously Mr. Brady's sitting there, and he's not counsel, but I think he'll say with that combined with the current formulas, that it will vet everybody. It will vet everybody.
Okay. So the amendment that we're voting on is that priority must be given to nonprofits. All in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the amendment carries. So now we are to the to approve as amended, which would include what just passed. All in favor of the motion as amended, please. I'm sorry, of the item as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so it passes by 7-1. Motion carries.
Final reading ordinance number 24041.
There being no further business before this council, we stand adjourned. Let's hope this is setting a precedent for the new year. We have not, I don't know that the council has ever done.
Yep.